Part 5. Chapter 31. When Lewis returned to consciousness, he knew something was wrong. He sat in an uncomfortable wooden chair in the center of a room, just like the room he had found the drowning in. The white, antiseptic walls burned his vision, bouncing back a light with no obvious source and making him close his eyes and wince. He struggled to stand and remove himself from the chair, but each time he attempted to rise, his body was pulled back down by a force that only grew stronger the more he struggled. "You know, I really tried," Evangeline said. As Lewis slowly opened his eyes, letting the light enter his vision, Evangeline's visage took form. She stood maybe 5 feet away, hands on her hips, looking down upon him. "I gave you a chance. The Crown didn't believe you could be swayed. Their reasoning was that your country would be more important to you than anything else. You aren't the first American that we've had to abuse," Lewis said slowly. "I wouldn't consider that the right word, but sure, if that's what you want to use. It's no different than what you did to my mother, is it?" A flicker of annoyance passed over Evangeline's face. And even if he didn't make it out of here alive, that bit of satisfaction was all he needed. "Your mother was an exceptional agent. While she worked for you, or should I say, while you manipulated her and lied to her," Evangeline's nostrils flared. "I have no time for this. What you know, or might not know, is a fraction of the truth. But I can tell you, Lewis, what is fully true is that you are going to help us find those last paintings so that we can rewrite history. That's your goal, right? Using these paintings to change it so that England is the only superpower. You believe the world would be better off like that. And you've been promised what? Right hand to the crown? Some other fancy title." He remembered what she had told him when he'd first pressed about what she got out of it. Head of the Royal Arcane Intelligence Agency. But he also knew it would piss her off for him to get it wrong. "You sound just like your mother," she said. "That's not a compliment. It's the highest compliment, because she bested you, something that you have failed to do," she reminded him. Evangeline circled him like a shark, standing behind him, running her soft hand over the side of his face and his shoulders. "I was willing to take a risk on you, make you something great, extend to you the same offer I extended to your mother. But insolence runs in your family, a poisonous gene that I will ensure is plucked out when we redraw the world." Lewis's body tensed for a moment, and the moment he did, he regretted his hesitation had provided a bit of information to Evangeline. "No, you thought that you were what? Going to go scot-free? That I would just forget about you? No, Lewis, you have all the makings of a very talented magician. You will do well under my services," she said after a moment's pause. "You will suit the crown well. There's no fucking way I'm going to help you. No, not you. You never would," she replied. "But, and perhaps this is more a philosophical question, I'm almost certain that you that is you now will be the same you when the world is rewritten. To do that," he said slowly, "you have to get the last painting, and I'm not going to help you with that. You can cut off my other hand. You can do whatever magic you want." "Such posturing," she said, almost warily. "No, you're not going to help me. You've made that very clear. And in doing so, subconsciously, perhaps, you've showed me your true nature every step of the way, challenging my authority, going against Noah's best interests when he truly did have your safety at heart. But here's something you don't get. I don't need you to get the paintings." She leaned down to whisper in his ear. "I only need your power. You might not be able to access it because you gave up your painting ability, but it's still there, Lewis, just inaccessible to you." As she stood, Evangeline's hands clasped against the back of his head, the heels of her hands touching, her long fingers like claws wrapping around the sides of his face and knitting over the front, like a clasp. "I would tell you that not resisting would make this hurt less, but your bloodline trait is tied directly to every part of you. Every part of your being is whereupon with it, and forcing it to activate will hurt no matter how willing you are. So, the best advice I can give you is to understand that your pain and your suffering will help our cause, and maybe that will give you some solace." It didn't, but he quickly forgot about anything but agony. Lewis didn't know whether he would describe it as pain. It was something worse, something dark and hollow, like she was reaching her fingers into the most secret and sacred parts of him and strangling them. It felt like what made him, his DNA, his soul, and every bit of flesh and bone was being violated. He wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to plead, knowing that this feeling, this harrowing invasion, would now define him. When he closed his eyes, he would think about her rummaging around inside of him. And when he tried to get close to someone, her face would be what he saw. Innocence in that moment was taken from him. A bit of him broken by an unspoken contract that was made null and void between two people. His sacred sanctity was taken, not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. He was bleached of who he was, conquered, twisted, and played with, reduced to nothing more than a thing, not a person. Whiteness filled his mind, not as before when she had exerted her magic to make him submit, but as a form of self-defense. He focused on it, on the nothingness that had once been filled with colors and shapes, with skilled techniques and his favorite art pieces, but that had been sacrificed to the painting in exchange for that stupid, worthless French expression. Just hours before he had had a gift, something that he could shield himself within. He was nothing more than a tool for her to use and discard when she was done. He had lost. Louis didn't hear Evangeline speak, but he felt through their connection her frustration as he attempted to put up his walls. Each one he put up, she broke down, sending it bursting into an explosion of dust. But he kept trying, kept shielding her from the richest part of him, the magic she was hunting to use for her own. The problem was, he was a novice, a dilettante at best, and he wouldn't be able to hold out for long. Something told him his body was breaking down, the manifestation of magical consequence. Something else told him Evangeline wouldn't stop. Even if it killed him, she would bring him to the brink of death. A mindless husk of nothing but harvestable magic, or perhaps something worse. There was no limit to what she would do to secure her claim, of that he was sure. Even knowing all that, knowing it was almost certainly pointless, Louis wouldn't let her win, because after he gave up, after he lost, who would stand between Evangeline and the crown and their goal? Like his mother said, there was more at risk than just them. Yet as quickly and suddenly as the blinding whiteness had set in, it slinked away, revealing a familiar space with familiar people. The sun had now set in Mumbai, a hospital room filled with just two people. Noah's father was in his bed, and Noah was slumped in the corner, his blazer thrown over his chest, arms crossed under the fabric. He was half asleep, dozing in and out, but his eyes snapped open and locked on Louis. "How did I get here?" Louis brokenly asked. Noah didn't attempt to move, just studied him, looking him slowly up and down. "You're not," he said quietly. "You're projecting yourself here. Except you don't know how to do that, which means you're reaching out to me, which means something's wrong." "Where are you?" Louis swallowed quickly, slowly standing. The chair in London hadn't transferred with him. He had collapsed on the floor. As he stood, he looked at his hand, held it up to his face, and could see through it faintly, the color going in and out as if the connection were weak. "I'm with Evangeline," he said. "She's trying to use my power to find a painting. Forcing a bloodline trait to activate like that is against a multitude of laws," Noah whispered. "She would have had to obtain permission from the crown to do it, which means she must be desperate." Louis knew he didn't have time to explain everything to Noah. "I don't know if I can keep this up. Don't know how long I can keep her out. Don't fight it," Noah quickly added, rounding the side of the bed to stand in front of Louis. "I can't let her find it. You saw what she wants to do when she finds the last one, and we can do nothing to fight her if you are dead," Noah gently but firmly said. "Combating evil is not the only way to defeat evil, Louis. Keeping you alive, the last current descendant of Edgar Dumont, is more important. But if you let her win, if you let her strip away your consciousness, you're good to no one. I saw something in the painting, a phrase. I don't know what it means, but I know she shouldn't have it. Focus your energy on that. Imagine it draped in cloth, shrouded from the rest of your mind. Let her sift through all your mental drawers and cabinets. She is looking for something specific. She won't care about what you're hiding if what she wants is easy to access. Breaking into someone's mind and forcing their bloodline trait will affect her. To use that to your advantage, Noah raised his arms, pulling Louis into an embrace. He placed his right hand against the back of Louis's head, holding him close with the other. "I'll find you," he said. "I'll get you out of there, I promise. But you have to stay alive. And if that means giving her all the paintings she wants, do it. You're no good to me gone dot, and I'm no good with you gone. Besides, I still have to take you out on that date, or my mother will kill me." Giving it felt like giving up. It was like standing on the precipice of a cliff and telling yourself it was safe to jump, with no guarantee that it actually was. But he had to trust Noah. He had to trust someone. And so, with a deep, shaky breath as he felt the heaviness of Noah's chest drift away, Louis gave in and let Evangeline's magic take over his own. Chapter 32. The pain of having his powers pulled from his soul weighed on Louis. It felt like every inch of him had been methodically filleted from his bones with a sharp knife. as if the chef holding it found pleasure in not only creating the meal, but in exacting as much pain as possible from his ingredients in the process. When Evangeline was done with him, she deposited him in his room in the contract house. No longer did it give him any sense of his home in Baltimore, though. The bookshelf and the familiar books had been removed. The bed was still pressed against the wall, but the desk and his clothes, anything that made the home feel personal and welcoming, were gone. This was now truly his prison, and he was its prisoner. She had said something to him along the lines of next time, perhaps you'll be more willing, but her voice was so distant, lost in the sea of pain as his body floated weightlessly. He wasn't sure what he heard. The only thing that helped ground him was remembering the feeling of Noah's chest against his cheek. He held on to that feeling even as she combed through his magic, plucking and choosing what to use and what to throw away. That helped keep him here, helped keep him from shattering and breaking into a million pieces. He trusted Noah. He had said he would come for him, and he would. He just had to hold on. Louis wasn't sure how long he lay in that bed, but eventually Evangeline returned. No knock on the door. No question about whether he was decent or willing to meet with her. She stood and cleared her throat. The two agents who flanked her walking over and grabbing Louis under each of his arms, forcing him to stand. "You'll rise when I enter," she said slowly. "Do you understand?" Louis nodded, his body feeling like a machine going through the motions, his eyes focused on her shoes, noticing scuffs on the tips of her Louboutins. She had worn them out of the office, he reasoned, in a hurry, and had been unable to replace them with something more practical. As a third agent entered the room, his white gloves with black runes on the back of them glowing brightly as if the magical batteries that powered them were functioning over capacity, Louis realized why and where those scuffs had most likely come from. In the agent's hand was a painting, black, with a man kneeling in penance, bony arms longer than any human arms, much like he had seen in The Drowning. The man in the painting was reaching upward and pulling down the flesh of his face, revealing white, harrowing bone. It reminded him of a painting he knew he held some personal connection to, although those memories were hazy and just out of reach. Whatever painting that morose image of a man pulling at his own skin in anguish reminded him of was important to him, and knowing he was missing that memory sent a pang through his chest. "You helped us find this," she said. "It was in Brazil, of all places, in the basement of a cafe. We paid the owner handsomely for it. If you care," she muttered, walking around the room, tracing the windowsill with the tip of her finger. She flicked the glass. It rippled and hummed with protective magic, as she gave a sign of approval before turning her gaze back to Louis. "So now we need you to neutralize it." Part of him wanted to scream and spit in her face, to tell her fuck no, but the warning that came as an automatic response, a soreness that was so deep he knew no medication or sweet words would soothe it, reminded him what would happen if he refused. So instead, he nodded. "Good boy," she grinned, and he hated how she said that last word. As she gave a silent command to the two holding him up, they gently let him go, forcing Louis to rely on his own strength, his body almost threatening to give out under him. The man holding the painting with the gloves that must have somehow protected him from the effects of it stood in front of him. The agent was no older than him, perhaps a year or two younger, a junior agent, he assumed, who had been given the opportunity of a lifetime to be involved in something great, bringing glory back to England. "We don't know what this painting does," Louis said, surprised at how raspy and quiet his voice was. "These men shouldn't be here. They know what they've signed up for," she replied, a tinge of annoyance simmering in her voice. "We've all taken the necessary precautions." As if to show what she meant, Evangeline's image flickered much like his hat in Mumbai. She wasn't here. She was just a projection of herself, while these three men were paying the price that they didn't even know they had offered. Louis wondered if that meant she couldn't hurt him, but he didn't dare risk finding out. Sighing in defeat, he squeezed his hand tight before reaching forward and pressing his palm against the black ink. He took a deep breath, riding the wave of weightlessness that crashed around him and the sickening turning of his stomach. As he fell through it, the stark gray blandness of his prison cell changed only slightly as he entered the new world. It took Louis several moments to gather his bearings. This time, diving into the painting felt harder, like he was pushing through molasses and forcing his way against a current. His stomach churned, and bile threatened to leak out of his mouth, but he swallowed it back. Focusing on the room around him, he smelled something sour, something that threatened the contents of his stomach once more. Soiled sheets mixed with urine and scat plagued his nostrils, and that familiar scent, once again, of blood. There was no confirmation of when or where he was. There were bars on the windows that looked out onto a courtyard. It was night once again, like it was in the previous painting. He was in a massive room. Stone walls aligned with mattresses on the stone floor on the left and the right. All of them were occupied with sleeping occupants. At least that's what he thought at first, until his vision adjusted to the dim light of the room. Yes, there were people in the beds, but their sheets were soaked with liquid so dark it almost looked black. Arterial blood, he concluded. The cuts were deep and intentional, each one of them killed in their sleep, all but one man, who sat in the center of the room. Lewis stilled his breath. He didn't feel as much fear and terror as he did before, perhaps because whatever Evangeline had done inside of him had turned that switch off. There was no question that Edgar had killed the men, and judging by his fingertips and the way the trails of blood all led back to him, he was using their blood for paint. It was similar to before, the same smell in the derelict house, but stronger than when he was using the bodies of the women he killed in London to accomplish his goal, using blood as a conduit to try to activate some profane magic. But now the bodies were here. Wherever here was not just their blood, and there was a miasma that seeped beyond Lewis's nostrils into his consciousness. I didn't intend for this to happen, Lewis breathed, not sure if it was a prayer or an apology. Edgar didn't even acknowledge his voice, continuing to use the blood that had pooled around him, though not pooled in a natural way. Lewis noticed. It was almost like a mote of viscous fluid separating them, neither flowing nor spreading. Lewis looked around and saw that the image on the floor wasn't simply painted on stone, but had first been sketched out using a bedsheet. I didn't mean to hurt you back then, he said, louder. I should be thanking you, Edgar said, voice distant and monotone. It was getting harder and harder to find people to lure back to my place. Fear. But here it's perfect. No one bats an eye when they hear a madman screaming in pain. Lewis swallowed thickly, sealing off his nose to prevent the sickening smells from overpowering his senses. He couldn't stop what happened in the past, but at least he could perhaps learn from it. This was the only space where Evangeline had no control over him. She didn't need to know what he saw, and as long as he neutralized the painting, she wouldn't care. Right now, the biggest strength he had against her was that she thought him to be worthless and broken. What happened after? Lewis paused. What happened after the last time I saw you? I almost died, Edgar said matter-of-factly, as if he had been asked about the weather. Landed on the cobblestones, broke my leg in 6 places. Doesn't work right anymore. I can't walk straight. They took me to a hospital, fixed me up, and that's where my luck ended. One of the men working there, Edgar continued, I had met 6 years prior, when I started looking for you, finding a way to do what you could do. His eyes flicked up for a moment. You've barely changed since I saw you last. Well, minus your hand. How cruel the world is. What happened in the hospital, Edgar? The man remembered me, remembered my interest in bodies. We had bonded over our love of alcohol, the hardness of a man's body, and, of all things, music. Edgar paused. Men of the occult, ultimately, but where we differed was that he wanted to use his power for good, to make the world a better place. Saw that he could help fix those who ailed and stave off death, and you didn't care about that. Not in the way he did. I didn't give a shit about others. I just wanted my sister back. I believed we could accomplish our goals together, a shared interest, a shared path, until it deviated, but he would never go as far as we needed. He would never understand that the dead have no power, that the living are where all that energy exists and thrives and grows. You tried to convince him to kill people, Lewis concluded, and he refused. I tried to convince him of the right course. He was weak, but now he worked at the hospital, and when he saw me in the bed, he reported me, claimed that I was insane, and so I ended up here, a place where no one would care what happened to those who went missing or were killed in the night. As I said, all of that was thanks to you. Lewis kept his distance from Edgar, distance being the one thing that protected him. Maybe. It's been 5 years, Edgar muttered, putting the final touches on the painting and using multiple coats of red blood to darken the background. He flicked both hands in opposite directions, speckles of blood landing on the edges of the sheet and on the stone. Placing both hands on the ground and letting out a pained grunt, he stood, favoring his right leg over his left. 5 years since you put me in here. 5 years to sift through every piece of magic I have read or seen, cobble it together, stitch it in some Frankenstein fashion to create something to prove that I can do anything, that I can defy the laws of physics and science and do what every man says they want to do. What's that? Lewis asked, afraid to ask. Why, make their own destiny, of course. But you know what else I discovered along the way, in between the runes and the spells? The foreign languages and the choices that damn my soul to hell. Every single one of us, magician or not, is mad down here. And up there and below, the gods laugh at us, finding pleasure in our suffering. And to that, I say, no more. Lewis took half a step back as Edgar finished, preparing himself for what might come. But what he didn't imagine was for the sheet to stir, and from beneath it for something to rise. As the fabric draped over his shoulders, it molded to the outline, taking the form of a human fusing with the shape of the fabric. It had no face, as if the sheet itself was a cloak, hiding its almost recognizable form. But it was a person, and it loomed 8 feet tall. The black hollow, where the face should be, was pointed directly at Lewis, and without warning, it lunged. Lewis was quick to react, his body moving without thinking. He pointed his magical wrist toward the ground and pushed backward, launching himself to put distance between himself and the attacker. His eyes flipped over to Edgar, seeing the manic hunger in his face. But Lewis had no time to linger on the man because the sheet creature struck again, moving faster than any person would be able to move. This time, it would have made contact, except in the pit of his stomach, much like when he was yanked out of the stain. Lewis felt the same feeling suddenly take over. The world went rushing by him, the madhouse cell replaced with his own prison once more. Evangeline had a grip on the back of his shirt, and there was a body's length of distance between him and the painting. "If you care about those men," she said, her eyes focused on the painting, "say its name." Lewis's gaze left her, glancing at what he had just been touching, and then he looked at the 3 men in the room, all clutching their heads, all screaming in agony. The young man who had held the painting had loosened his grip. He stumbled backward, crying out in broken English, his eyes rolling back, detaching with an audible snap before spinning in their sockets. Round and round they went, blood and bile spilling from his mouth, and the painting just floated, its malevolent energy falling over Lewis's shoulders. "Lewis," Evangeline warned, "it is only you, me, and these men in here. They do not deserve to die because you hate me." She was right. Lewis knew it. Deep down, he couldn't let innocent souls pay the price for her evil. His vision focused back on the painting. Gritting his teeth, he saw no other out but to say the first words that came to mind. The madness. Chapter 33. Neutralizing the madness had not come without loss of life. The young agent who had been carrying the painting had been the closest imitation of an illustration Lewis had ever seen. Before the painting had been silenced, the boy had dug his fingernails into his skin and, much like the image, pulled his flesh down, his face now only bone. Flaps of skin hung lazily at his chin. His dead form had been slumped in a kneeling position, head bowed backward. Evangeline was nice enough to remove the body, but the bloodstain on the floor had been left. "Do not clean it up," she ordered the house. "Allow him to see what his hesitation has wrought." My hesitation? She had no idea what he'd endured, what he'd witnessed, and yet she thought it was that easy to go into the painting, decipher a code that only he had access to, and then provide a name that felt both true to the painting and to Lewis's soul. What a goddamn bitch. But he couldn't articulate that, just as he couldn't easily say the name of the painting when he was pulled out. So he was left with the horror of his memories and the example of what those memories pertain to always present. Lewis spent the rest of the day curled up on his bed, knees pulled to his chest, looking at the bloodstain. That man had had friends, lovers, a mother, a father who cared about him, and Evangeline had just tossed the agent aside, justifying his death as a service to the crown, justifying his death as a lesson for Lewis to learn. He wondered if the agent's parents would ever know. Would they be given something in solace to remember him, or told some lie about his valiant service? Would their minds be wiped with some spell? Would Evangeline even remember his name after a week? The next morning, when the door opened, Lewis had just dozed off, but jolted awake. He half expected Evangeline to appear, but instead, the agents, different from before, walked into the room. "Does she want me?" he asked, watching them carefully. Neither of the agents said anything at first, the older of the two closing the door behind himself and locking it. Lewis's hackles rose, his muscles tightening. He hadn't eaten in almost 3 days. The little water that he had forced himself to consume barely held him over. He was weak and tired, the pain of the torture from before finally subsiding. But even in his best condition, he wasn't sure he could hold his own against these two. The taller of the two spoke. "We don't have much time." At first, Lewis didn't understand, but he didn't relax his body. The agent cleared his throat, using his right hand to hit the side of his own face once, twice, then 3 times before shaking his head. When he spoke again, the voice was familiar. "Sorry," Akana said through the man. "Your minds are heavily fortified, more than I thought, but no, we don't have much time." Lewis still didn't understand. "What are you doing here? Or should I ask, how are you here?" "Technically we're not here, but I'll let that slide," Akana muttered. "Who is we?" "Me." Another familiar voice, prim, proper, French, and smooth, spoke in sharp distinction to the short, stout man with a wide-set beard that it emanated from. A voice he had last heard in Osaka. Lewis's body tensed up again as he took a step back. Yes, he was weak, and no, he couldn't imagine holding his own against an agent of the British Museum, let alone this powerful Mudge. But if he struck fast, using the bed and hurling it at the man who had been overridden by Cassandra's consciousness, maybe he could deliver a long-lasting blow. Cassandra raised her hands, and Akana stepped forward. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I need you to trust me," Akana said. "She almost killed you," Lewis growled. "She killed your father, and she will pay for that when this is over. To be fair, I almost killed you, remember? But right now, none of that is here nor there. Just know that our interests align, and neither of us is here to hurt you. Besides, Noah sent us to you." Immediately, the burning hatred toward Cassandra was stifled. His gaze focused on Akana over Cassandra. "Is he okay? Is he alive?" Akana nodded. "He reached out to us the moment he made contact with you. Is he still in India?" Akana shook her head. "I don't think it's wise to say where he is, considering where you are right now," she muttered. "And like I said, time is not on our side, but he told us what happened, and we're here to get you out." There was no doubt in his mind that Akana was telling the truth. But Cassandra, on the other hand, "How do I know that she's not controlling you?" he asked. "You are a powerful magician, Akana, but I'm a powerful magician, and that should be the end of that sentence," she firmly stated. "Trust me," Cassandra said, and paused. "I know how ironic that sounds, but I am here of my own volition, and Akana has allowed me to live, as long as I follow her rules. Right now, the rules state that we are putting aside our differences and stopping Evangeline." I told her everything. Lewis kept his gaze on Cassandra. "Everything?" he asked. At first, Cassandra didn't speak, letting out a soft sigh. "So, you know, that you knew my mother?" "Yes." Akana chimed in. She told me that. She told me about Evangeline's goal, about the Crown's mission, about your mother, Lewis, and about the time she met you." Lewis hesitated, confusion passing over his face. "The first time we met was in Japan. You were there." Cassandra shook her head. "I was there in the hospital when your mother died, when you were waiting. We had multiple conversations, multiple opportunities for me to pry and see what your mother had told you about me, about the paintings, perhaps find out if you even knew their origins. And each time the conversation ended, I started it again and again and again, wiping your memory over and over. You knew nothing," she quickly added, "and I regret the role I played in manipulating you. But for now, Akana cut her off. "We don't have time for this. The contract house that you're in is tied to Evangeline, no longer to Noah. According to him, that's basic protocol. She probably has already gotten an alert that we're here. The only thing keeping her from coming to us is Cassandra's magic. I overrode some of the rooms that exist here," the French woman explained. "The agents are probably right outside the door right now, struggling with the rooms, but they won't last forever. If what you say is true," Lewis said slowly, working his way through his decision, "then you understand Evangeline will stop at nothing to get that last painting, which is why we're here for you," Akana said, annoyance prickling at the edge of her voice. "That's not what I'm saying," Lewis corrected. "I need you to get me to Baltimore." The agent's face was masked by confusion. "My father lives there," he said. "Evangeline will come for him if she cannot get to me, and he's all that I have left. Lewis, we cannot risk." He raised his hand, cutting Akana off. "I'm not letting him suffer any more because of Evangeline. My mother, all of this goes back to that woman and her singular focus on power." Akana sighed, glancing over at Cassandra. Cassandra's eyes stayed on Lewis, unblinking, and he matched her gaze. "You owe me." Eventually, Cassandra agreed. "I can create a portal that will take him to Baltimore. This house is old. Its magic is grounded but flawed. We'll meet you there," Akana said. "Make sure your father is protected." And then go and deal with these paintings. Lewis nodded. It was good enough. Cassandra walked forward, pressing her hands against the wall of the house. She took a deep breath and pushed the rippling stone. As her hands passed through it, the contract house groaned and shuddered, cracks appearing in the wood and stone that instantly healed. But each time one healed, two more appeared. Interesting, Cassandra said, her voice distant, her eyes closed. There. Our system's set up to prevent someone from tampering with the house. But, she continued after a pause, there's a clear path forward, as if the house is telling me how to override its defenses, which was exactly what it was doing, Lewis thought. He looked upward toward the ceiling, smiling softly, mouthing thank you. A moment later, the bathroom door swung open, and Lewis saw a very familiar sight. His family living room, a place he hadn't been in for over 5 months. Go, Cassandra muttered. I won't be able to hold this forever. I also need to remove the memory of where we went from the house's ledger. It'll save us some time, but I can't do all this while you both linger. But to do that, you have to stay here, Akana said. I'm aware. Cassandra nodded, her eyes still closed. Evangeline will come in. She'll try to pull my mind out of the agents. She won't succeed. She smiled. It's going to hurt like a bitch, Akana informed her. Cassandra opened one eye, glancing over at them. When you've lived as long as I have, you don't mind a little pain, she said. Akana's eyes locked with Lewis's. I'll meet you there. You might want to turn away, though. Lewis didn't have time to ask why before Akana turned to face the opposite wall. She walked forward, putting only 4 or so inches between her and the wall, brought her head back, and slammed the agent's forehead against it, causing his body to slump forward. Lewis winced, and he wanted to go and check to see whether the man was still alive, but Cassandra chimed in. Go, she said firmly, her voice a hiss. Sure enough, the image of Lewis's living room began to ripple, fading in and out. With a deep breath, Lewis lunged forward and dove into the image, Alice diving down the rabbit hole once more. Chapter 34. It felt weird to be back home, considering everything that was happening. After his mother's death, Lewis took refuge in his art. It didn't give him the solace that he thought it would, but he distanced himself from mostly everybody, including his father. It had been almost half a year since he had been home, an unheard of occurrence before his mother's passing. Weekend dinners were common, and sometimes his visits were even more frequent, to do laundry or to just be around those who knew who he truly was. Stepping into the living room, a weight was lifted off his shoulders. Even if his father wasn't here, currently at work at the nonprofit he ran, Lewis felt him in the air. The half-finished grocery list pinned to the refrigerator, the lukewarm cup of coffee on the counter, even the lunch pail his father always forgot to take sat by the door untouched. This was where Lewis belonged, not in London or Paris or Perth or Lagos. He should be here, and in any other reality, in any other circumstance, he would be still processing and mourning his mother's passing, figuring out how to move forward. Regret and longing were left at the door as Akana pushed it open. No longer was she in the body of one of the British agents, but her own, including the short-cut black hair with strands of silvery gray peeking from the roots. Lewis's eyes drifted to them before he quickly focused back on her face, but not before she noticed. The price of magic, she said. I'm sure I've shaved 3 or 4 years of my life. Lewis arched an eyebrow, and she waved it off. I'll explain later, she said. Your father's not here. He's at work. Akana nodded, seemingly to herself. That will make this easier. She paced through the house, dragging her fingers over the walls and countertops. She said in the back of her throat. There's magic here. My mother was a magician. Akana raised her right hand, cutting him off. Not that. Not the lingering magic of someone who lived here in your walls. She tapped her nails against the drywall. It's stitched into the foundation, threaded into the wood. There are runes and spells here, deactivated now, but the last pulse they gave off was only about 5 months ago. He said after a moment, that's when my mom died. Akana turned to look at him. If your mother enchanted this house, then they would have stopped working when she passed. I saw a vision of her, Lewis explained. In it she was talking to Evangeline, and she said she would make sure the British Museum would never find her or me, and I'm guessing it worked. There are layers upon layers of runes here. It's impressive how they sync. This is very accomplished magic. There are runes here that I wouldn't think would work together, and yet they do, balancing each other's weaknesses to become stronger. Akana was looking past him, and Lewis imagined even past the physical into the metaphysical. She had that look of someone who was experiencing something very few could. "This will make reinforcing your home easier," she promised. "I can activate the old rooms, maybe even strengthen them and put new ones in. It'll take me about 15 minutes. Lewis had nowhere else to be, so, leaving Akana to her work, he made his way down the hall and up the stairs. The first door on his left was his bedroom, exactly like he left it when he moved out. Half-drawn sketches with different mediums of charcoal, watercolor, paint, pencil, even ballpoint pen when he went through a phase. Posters of Paramore and Taylor Swift, of Josh Groban and other men he had been infatuated with in his younger years. His father had wanted to turn the room into a study to work on his model trains, but his mother was very firm. In case he ever needs to come back, she said one Thanksgiving. The idea of returning home had been sickening then, but he let her have it. As he sat on the bed now looking around, he couldn't have been happier. Sitting on the counter next to his now obsolete desktop computer was a photo of him and his family. Lewis walked over and ran his fingers over the glass, the memory washing over him of them at Disney World right after high school graduation, a reward for getting into SCAD, his top pick. They were all happy then. There was no magic, no paintings, none of this, just a normal family with normal hopes and normal dreams. Even if that was never true, he believed it to be true, and that was enough for him. Lewis paused when he heard a new voice from downstairs. At first, his body tensed, worried that it was Evangeline who had found them, but the highly aristocratic, almost lyrical way the person spoke confirmed it was Cassandra. His attention drifted back to his room as something at his desk caught his eye. Curiously, he pulled a piece of paper from under the keyboard. Thicker than most, it was the type of paper that would be used for watercolor. On the back, in typical Lewis fashion, was a date roughly 11 years prior to today's. Frowning, he unfolded the paper, the creases dividing it into 4 quadrants. It was a rudimentary piece of art, a byproduct of him just dabbling into not only art as a whole, but watercolor in particular. It took him a moment to decipher what the image was supposed to be. The view passed through the cast iron gates in an archway into the graveyard about a mile or so from his home, the same graveyard where his mother was buried. But that wasn't what interested him about the drawing. On the lower half of the watercolor, spanning the 2 bottom quadrants, 3 people stood looking into the graveyard. Their backs were fairly nondescript. He gritted his teeth as he thought of how much better the image would be if he had painted it now, if he still had that skill. But as he studied it closer, familiar traits of the 3 became clear, and a gasp left his mouth. Folding the paper up and shoving it into his pocket, Lewis ran out, taking the stairs 2 at a time, almost tripping and falling. Cassandra frowned, looking over at him. "Can you please not kill yourself before Evangeline has a chance at attempting it?" she said, bored. "How'd you get away?" he asked. "Magic," was her infuriating response. "When you and Akana left, Evangeline wasn't far behind you. I scrubbed our location as best I could. That doesn't sound like you succeeded," Akana noted. "You try and do that while a high-ranked magician is pulling your veins out of your body through your pores. Pity about that boy I hijacked, though. Well, I suppose not much pity. He had a girl he wanted to propose to. Did you know that?" Lewis ignored her, instead unfolding the paper and showing it to the 2 of them. Akana's and Cassandra's faces were puzzled. "I gave up my ability to paint and everything connected with it," he said in one breath, before Akana or Cassandra could complain, bark at him at how stupid the decision was. He shook his head. "I gave up my ability to try and end this all. Because even if I go into a fugue state, I can't actually draw where we need to go. A contract I made with one of the Macabre. Great deal," Akana growled. "You gave up the one advantage that we had in finding them." "Such a stupid, be quiet," Lewis hissed. Akana's face screwed into anger, and her shadow flickered like a serpent ready to strike. "I do have a way to get it back. This isn't far from here," he said, placing the paper on the counter. "What is that?" "It's where my mother is buried. They look like us," Cassandra chimed in, standing in the same position as they were in the painting, with herself on his left and Akana on his right. "Exactly. I painted it a little more than a decade ago. It must have been one of my first fugue states, before I knew what they were. But I can feel the truth of this painting, and that means there's something there for us. We have nothing to lose," Cassandra explained. "This is a dead end here, and we need to get moving anyway. I had my father," Lewis reminded her. "I know you don't have an idea of what it means to care for someone, But that's why we're here. Cassandra shot Louis a look he couldn't exactly place. Was it anger? Had he touched a nerve? He didn't know much about Cassandra. Not really. If she had someone to care for, she hid it well. Of course I know that, she hissed. But the best way to protect him and everyone we care about is to end this. And we can't do that by standing here and being caught. I have an idea about how to do that, Louis said, folding the paper and slipping it into his back pocket. I read it when I first got to the contract house. Akana crossed her arms over her chest, not convinced, and the knitting of her brow told him she was still angry at him for before. Perhaps for speaking out of turn or for making such a stupid decision that she would never make, but she rolled her eyes and stepped back. Let's go. Walking between houses through alleyways and walkways cut the walk to the graveyard down to less than 5 minutes. When they arrived, Louis paused, Cassandra and Akana making it a few steps forward before noticing he wasn't following them. I haven't been here since the funeral, he whispered, not sure if they heard him. Cassandra sighed, the first of the two to move back to him, putting her hand on his shoulder. One way or another, she said gently, this will be over soon. And no matter what happens, I know this much, your mother would be proud of you. I never lived up to my mother's expectations, he muttered in disbelief. Maybe not, but few people do, Akana said. My father was never proud of me. I could never do enough for him. Live up to our name, and that's not who your mother was, Cassandra countered. I admit I only knew her in the confines of her working for Evangeline, and I'm sure in some way that clouds my opinion of her. There was only a part of herself that she showed to me, but when she figured out what Evangeline was doing, the only thing she cared about was you. You are fighting back against Evangeline. Win or lose, your mother would be proud, and I see her in you. She was a problem solver, Louis, and that's what you're doing right now. Her kind words didn't absolve her of what she had done to him, to Akana, and to how many other countless people Louis didn't know about. But they were enough to make him walk through the archway to the graveyard. As they walked, weaving their way through tombstones, with Louis leading the way, he explained his plan. I read in a book about magic how it can't be created or destroyed, like every other form of energy. That's correct, Akana said, sounding almost bored by this rudimentary mansplaining. And yet she also built off it, as if she herself couldn't help but show off the depth of her knowledge. It's how magicians work. We siphon magic, push it into things, pull it out, but we don't ever get rid of it. It just occupies a different space than before. It takes a different shape. The magic that you lost when you made the agreement with the painting didn't disappear. It was just placed inside the painting. Exactly, Louis said. So, when my mother died, the magic didn't leave her. As they stopped in front of a gravestone on a hill with lilacs and lilies freshly placed on a cold stone, Louis fell silent. Jessica Dixon, it read. Loving mother, accomplished wife, stellar human being. Both Akana and Cassandra gave him a moment before Cassandra spoke up. Repeat what you just said, she said slowly. Louis's gaze focused on the tombstone, unable to look at either of them. My mother might have died physically, but her magic is still inside her body. And if her magic is connected to Edgar Dumont just like mine was, we can pull it from her and use it. He glanced at the two of them. You said it yourself. Magic cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes vessels. You can't put one person's magic into another person, though. Not easily, at least. It's like different types of blood. And even then, there are major complications. Akana informed them both. That's true, Cassandra said, slowly processing what Louis was thinking. For most people, you have a bloodline trait. Consistency is being a blood relative. All a bloodline trait is a genetic marker triggering a magical ability. So maybe it will recognize his mother's magic inside of him, and he can then use it. Say that's the case. Even if you do take in her magic, it only has a temporary window, Akana warned. It's not yours. There's only so much magic within her body, and she's not going to be able to draw more in. Once you use it, it will go into the ether and continue its cycle. You'll have maybe one chance to get it right. One more time to use it on a painting, and I'll use it on the final one, he said. All we need is one chance to turn the tide in our favor. It's dangerous, Akana muttered, disapproval on her face. It's also borderline necromancy. That's rich coming from you, Cassandra said, arching a brow. Her eyes drifted over to Louis. When she found me in Brazil, our little agent here used some very profane magic on me. I doubt Japan approved that. Akana fell silent, not willing to argue with her. Instead, Cassandra continued. It would mean defiling your mother's grave, Lewis. There would be nothing left of her. Pulling magic out of her bones would turn her to dust. There's no difference between that and time and Earth taking her. No, Cassandra said, agreeing. But those are passive actions. You are willingly doing this. Are you sure that's what you want? We don't have another choice, he said. Cassandra shrugged. Glancing over at Akana again, she said, You are the most accomplished of the three of us. Do you think you can pull the magic out? Akana hesitated for a moment before conceding. In theory, yes. Then it's settled, Cassandra said. We do this. We get the magic, and we cut Evangeline off before she can finish what she is aiming to accomplish. How many paintings have you purified for her? Lewis did a quick calculation. 4 or 5, he said. I'd have reason to believe she might have found another 1 or 2. Shiminsaka, Akana uttered, squatting in front of the grave. She whispered another word in Japanese, bowing her head and clasping her hands together in reverence. It means we're surrounded on all sides. At a disadvantage. You all might say, behind the 8 ball. We're further behind than that. Cassandra sighed. Evangeline wasn't completely honest with you. She doesn't need all of them to find the last one. She just needs enough of them. Each painting contains a bit of magic that can be used to track the last one. Doing so will burn the magic out of them. But how many she needs is the question. That made Lewis start. Burn the magic out. He remembered after the drowning, the fire Evangeline had cast over the painting. To neutralize it, he had thought. But he realized that wasn't what she was doing. She had been gathering the magic out of it, using it to point her toward the last one. All this time. A one-time spell, Lewis concluded. Cassandra nodded. But with you in the equation as a conduit, as a grounding anchor, she can use you as a point of triangulation to find the last one. Funnel the dangerous magic through you. She just needs enough of them to do it. So we're too late, Akana said. Which means it doesn't matter if we defile this grave. No, because the same thing can be said in reverse. You have come in contact with most of those paintings, Cassandra said to Lewis. You are the descendant of a Dumont. The power doesn't come from the paintings like she believes. It comes from a descendant, Lewis whispered. Exactly. The paintings are what allow any person to find them. Your mother knew this. It's what she discovered. She paused. Rather, it's what I told her. And when she added it up, figuring out what Evangeline was doing and how close she was without her knowing, she fled. But you, Lewis, you can find the 10th painting on your own, without the others, because, in simple terms, the last painting is your birthright. Lewis finished. That's why my mother hid me and herself. Cassandra nodded. I believe Evangeline is hedging her bets. Finding enough paintings so that if for some strange reason you refuse, or can't accomplish the goal, she has a backup plan. Coincidentally, you are the threat to the paintings, keeping you close until she was sure of your allegiances and then taking you out if she had to was her way of guaranteeing the plan. If you knew this for so long, Akana said, standing up, why didn't you do anything about it? I could have, Cassandra muttered. In fact, I tried. Her eyes drifted down to Lewis's arm. I tried to kill you in Perth. Bringing the house down, that would have ended all of this. I thought the house collapsed because of the stain, Lewis said, angry. Cassandra raised her hand and sighed. It's in the past now. Attempting to murder me is not in the past. He held up the stump that used to be his right hand. This is not in the past. Cassandra fell, silent. A pregnant pause among the three of them. Not to interrupt this, Akana chimed in, but also to totally interrupt this. Your feelings are valid. Lewis, trust me, I get it, but we can deal with this after we deal with Evangeline. Add it to her ledger of crimes that she has to pay for. For now, we have something we need to do. I'll set up the perimeter. I'll pull the magic out of this, and we'll use it to find the last painting before Evangeline can. While you do that, Cassandra said, Lewis, will you walk with me? I'd have something to tell you. I don't want to talk to you, Lewis said plainly. Fair, she replied, but I think you should know what I have to say. If something happens to me, this information should not die with me. Go with her, Akana said. It's going to take me at least 10 minutes to do this, and you looming over my shoulder isn't going to help. Lewis glared at Akana, but begrudgingly agreed, following Cassandra. She had already started walking down the hill they had come up. He didn't like the idea of being alone with her, but the way Cassandra showed her back to him reminded him if she really wanted to, she could snap his body in half right here and now. So perhaps he should at least hear what she had to say, because Cassandra was right. Who knew what could happen in the next hour to all three of them? Lewis followed Cassandra down to the bottom of the hill, where she found shade under a tree that loomed over a dozen or so graves. "What did you—" "Give me a moment," Cassandra whispered, her eyes closed as she tilted her head upward, letting the breeze graze her cheek. She let out a deep sigh, holding the air inside of her before opening her eyes and turning her gaze to Lewis. Without a word, she extended her hand to him, palm upward. Lewis hesitated, noticing the lines on Cassandra's palm. He knew people believed you could tell a person's future by the lines etched within their skin. Their financial success, how many kids they would have, their love life, all of it. Divination based on biology. It was a fun thing to play when he was a kid, like a game of MASH. But he didn't believe in it. Not until now. He wondered what the lines on her hand said. The moment they touched, Lewis felt different. The lingering smell of mildew and death in the damp air disappeared almost instantly. The world around them melted away into something familiar. The reverse of how the color had drained before, becoming bright once more. For a moment, Lewis thought that Cassandra had done something to him, cast a spell, and in a sense, she had. They were no longer at the gravesite. They were in a convent bells chiming, the sound of women exchanging quiet words in French, hymns and the intonations of scripture being read in the distance. "Where did you take me?" Lewis said. There was no accusation in his voice. Part of him knew they hadn't left. "My memories. I want to show you something before I ask you for a favor.com. It won't take long." Cassandra led Lewis along the cobblestones and through the archways with familiarity, her hands behind her back. She was still dressed like she was in modern times, in the same pantsuit that fit her so well. Women in habits and a few priests moved by them, completely ignorant of their presence. "I'm not like you and Arcana, Lewis. No, you're a murderer." Cassandra chuckled lowly, not at all disturbed by the moniker, which made Lewis shudder. "Yes, but that's not what I mean. I'd have been around far longer than you, or Noah, Arcana, or even Evangeline, and like most things of age, I hold knowledge you would be wise to know before moving forward." Cassandra pushed open the door, leading to a room with more than 36 cots. People laid strewn out on them, the smell of sickness palpable in the air. Lewis covered his nose. Even as a guest, within her memories, he could still sense death, its lingering presence, its hunger. He frowned, glancing at Cassandra as they walked. "What's the point of this?" "Back roughly 130 years ago," she said, "I wanted to serve God. I found my calling at this convent." In English, it would translate to the Church of the Holy New Martyr, Cassandra of Trebizond. "Where you took your name from, my father was not a man who saw much in women, their only value being what they could provide for a man. And I didn't want that. I couldn't save my older or younger sister, but I could save myself. And the best way back then for a woman to have agency was to devote herself to another man, to God. I found a calling here," she said, stopping in front of the cot of a wheezing boy. There was a nurse, a nun, tending to the sweat on his brow. She didn't look like Cassandra, but from the way Cassandra smiled at her, he assumed she remembered her fondly. "I was good at what I did, so good that when they found a man after midnight leaning against our church doors bleeding out, they called to me and asked me to soothe him through the night and be the last happy face he saw." "Edgar," Lewis whispered. With a flick of her finger, the images in front of them changed. It was late now, only a few candles lighting the room, but he saw Cassandra sitting at the edge of the bed where an older version of Edgar that Lewis had seen before was covered in blood. "Did you ever figure out what happened to him?" Cassandra nodded. "It took some time. First of all, we were all surprised that he lived through the night, but yes, he confided in me, found comfort in me, and he explained his fantastical tales, how he had escaped from an asylum in London, found passage across the ocean to France as a stowaway." Cassandra continued, but for Lewis, her voice drifted off. He remembered the asylum well, remembered what magic Edgar displayed there. The only way he could have gotten out was by using the madness, and if it did to the residents what it had done to the people in the contract house. Lewis forced his attention back to Cassandra. "If you knew what he was, knew he was a criminal, you should have turned him in." "I very well should have," she agreed. "But you see, Lewis, I was a woman of God, a woman who feared the afterlife and the tales of magic, and woes didn't interest me. I thought they would corrupt me, but I listened because I knew that's what he needed. He was never far from death's door. Wounds he had ignored for far too long had turned septic. He could have gone at any night, any day, really, and I thought it would be nice to be there with him. And if listening to his stories made him happy, then so be it. He told me of a choice that he made, a dark choice. Edgar's life, as I'm sure you have seen now, was often filled with strife and pain. When we were in Japan, I mentioned to you a woman that he loved, the inspiration for the lingering, that woman that he killed. That woman who was killed was his wife, but was no fault of Edgar's. I would soon learn, she hastily added. It was poor fate, pure unluckiness, but Edgar didn't see it like that. He saw it as another person in his life taken from him. So he turned to dark magic, searched the corners of the earth to find it, using blood and souls in the hopes to bring her back. I believe you have seen the painting that inspired this. The madness, Lewis explained. It wasn't just his wife, though Dottie was. Cassandra's hand rose, squeezing his shoulder. I know, Lewis frowned, looking up at her. Time is a fickle thing at best. Lewis, you going back, dealing with the drowning, set Edgar's life in motion. He latched onto you, the idea of you, the power that you, blinking and out of time, showed existed. As such, he would do anything to have that power, to save his sister. Exactly, love is a powerful thing, Lewis, but so is guilt. Are you saying, Lewis said slowly, because I helped Evangeline with the drowning, I set Edgar on his course. He molded over, just speaking his thoughts aloud. I am the one who made him create the painting back in London that caused him to kill all those people, send him to the asylum. Nothing is that finite and absolute when it comes to magic. Did you play a role? Yes, but so did I. So did Arcana. So did Noah. Every person who you have come across has played a role, even those you didn't. Time and magic are two of the most unpredictable forces. They move backward and forward, up and down, through and in between. You shouldn't dwell on your role in this. It will only lead to the same fate as Edgar's. Cassandra shrugged, waving her hand again. Time unfurled around them as if it was played on twice the speed. He saw Edgar slowly get better, and then wax and wane in sickness and health. It was at least a month, maybe 2, that he was here, with Cassandra always by his side. The memory accelerated again, this time stopping at a moment with Edgar out of bed walking, barely, and wheezing heavily. While he was getting better, the look on Cassandra's face didn't reflect joy, though. There was something dark in her eyes. What happened between you and Edgar? Cassandra was silent for a moment before letting out a small sigh. Men happen, Lewis. They always do. I view my kindness as a strength. I view the ability to help others as my calling. I saw God in the work I did, and I was happy with it until Edgar wanted more. As he was starting to get better, we were discussing sending him out of the convent. He didn't need our sanctuary, and we needed the beds for others who were closer to death, who needed absolution, but he didn't want to go. And it wasn't that he didn't want to go, but that he didn't want to leave you, Lewis finished. I had known that Edgar was a painter. When he was in a lucid state, he would ask for charcoal or ink, anything to take his mind off the pain. So we provided it. His drawings and sketches were beautiful, usually of his vista outside the window or things from his memories. I have them in my home if you would like to see them one day. It might help you understand. Lewis wasn't sure he wanted to understand Edgar. All of the pain and strife that man had caused him. He just wanted to put it behind him, but he let Cassandra continue. One day it was decided that Edgar would be sent to a neighboring city to recover. I was to deliver the news to Edgar. He did not take it well. He showed me paintings of me that he had done. Not just one, not just 2, but dozens. They were beautiful, elegant paintings, but there was something twisted about them. There was a sense of possession in his drawings, inferences about my body, the curve of my hips, the arch of my back. It was as if he thought I was his to manipulate in every single way. And in this way, I suppose he was right. I had no other patients, only him. There was a rumor that Edgar came from money, and the one thing Catholics love more than power is money. So, when I rebuked his advances, when I refused to see him, when he was forced to go, Edgar cursed me, not just literally. He screamed my name and demanded I be with him. I remember huddling out of view from the window, some of my sisters holding me. I thought I was rid of him as the carriage left. I thought I would never see him again until a year later. Carrying a pitcher of water for a patient, I tripped. It was dark. The hallway was barely lit. The steps were steep. More than 24 other sisters and priests had fallen and broken bones. We were always told to be careful. Cassandra raised her right hand, running it through her short hair. I felt my head hit a corner. I heard the crack, and I knew what it was. I knew what was about to happen. I lay there at the foot of the stairs waiting to die, saying my prayers, accepting my peace, but it never came. I sat up and felt where my head had been hit, but there was no wound. There was blood on the steps. My clothes were ripped, but there was no sign that I had fallen, not physically at least. Death had not claimed me as it should have. It took me a few more years. I hid it, of course, thinking I had somehow been touched by the devil, one of my sins from another life, a younger life coming back to bite me. But eventually curiosity got the best of me, and I left the common searching for answers. No wound could affect me, Lewis. I couldn't retain any scars. My skin is exactly how it was when I met Edgar, because Edgar had immortalized you in one of his cursed paintings. Cassandra nodded. Eventually I learned how to steel myself from pain. That was helpful in touring the world trying to find the source of this curse. It took me to some dark places. You'd be surprised by the type of people who are yearning for immortality, but at its core, it all led back to one person. His love, his obsession to always have me gave me this, and I became another one of his paintings. I'm sure you know this by now, but I've been looking to break this. Why didn't you just find your paintings and destroy them? Break the curse? I tried, she said. But you saw what happened in Japan. I can't destroy them. I thought perhaps if I could pull the magic from the paintings, like Akana is doing with your mother's remains, I could overpower them. But it's not that easy. Love is a powerful thing, he said, echoing her words earlier. So is guilt, and so is obsession, she added. Its own twisted form of enchantment that lives on even after his death, because his descendants live on. Cassandra snapped her fingers, the illusion of her memories melting away, returning them to present-day Baltimore. We're ready, Akana said. Speaking within their minds, Lewis hesitated with a confused look. A sea of torrid emotions crashed inside of him. One part pity, one part confusion. Cassandra was just as much a victim of Edgar Dumont as Lewis was, as the men and women he killed. Someone who was a piece of fodder for him to accomplish his goal. To hell with whoever stood in his way. How different would Cassandra's life have been if Edgar had never met her? If Lewis hadn't thrown him out that window, sending him to the asylum, forcing him to flee? Those thoughts bounced around in his head as he and Cassandra walked up to Akana. The grave hadn't been defiled, not in the way he expected. A single rune was drawn on the dirt, glowing a vibrant purple like the hottest of flames, a tendril of white mist shooting out like a geyser. From the grave, Akana's shadow pulled outward. That's pure magic, Akana said. It's isolated for now, unable to dissipate into the air. She glanced over at Lewis, beckoning him forward. Lewis stepped into the ring of darkness. Much like before, the space in the dark circle was cold, colder than before. Lewis also noticed in that moment his heart had stopped beating. Don't worry, you're fine, Akana said. I just made a pocket separate from reality to house it. I need you to take this and breathe it in like smoke. Remember, we'll only have a day, maybe two. Are you ready? Lewis was ready, but he didn't say anything. Not yet. He was still hung up on what Cassandra had said about the paintings, as she had never asked that favor of him, explaining the reason she had shown the memories had been cut short. Lewis, glancing back at Akana, he nodded. Take a deep breath, she said. Hold it until you can't breathe anymore. Exhale, and right before you inhale, I'll give it to you. Lewis followed, taking the deepest breath he possibly could. Then he held and released it. He nodded just before the urge to inhale automatically took over, and with a flick of her hand, she threw the magic at him. It clashed against his face, feeling warm. It was as if his body had been missing this heat, and it was the exact thing he needed. Every vein and every neuron tingled with excitement. His vision became sharper and the world brighter. It was as if he had never felt such joy or completion before. It was a high like no other. Akana smiled as she stood, her shadow retreating behind her. How do you feel? Lewis didn't speak but nodded, silently telling the two to follow him. Walking away a few feet from them, he looked at the sky. The clouds were no longer just clouds, their shapes shifting and turning in front of him. Dragons, he said. I also see a three-headed elephant over there, pointing to what he assumed they would just see as a mountain of white, puffy clouds. Akana sighed. Good, because that could have gone horribly wrong, she said. I wasn't sure that you weren't just going to explode right in front of me. That's actually part of the reason I had the void set up. Magic like that can act temperamentally and basically turn you into a nuclear bomb. I'm sorry, Lewis said, snapping his gaze to her. You were going to just let that happen without telling me. If I had told you, Would you have gone through with it? Of course he wouldn't have. And he had full intention of telling her that. But the thought left his mind and was replaced with another. Those memories of Cassandra came rushing back to him, but they weren't just replayed. He saw them through a different lens now, saw the subtext of what she was showing him, and why. In mid-sentence, he turned to her and saw a soft smile, almost a sad one, and he knew. Are you sure? He asked. Cassandra nodded. It's your choice. You can only do it once. I'm sorry. What are we talking about here? Akana said. Need I remind you, that amount of magic we just used is probably going to attract attention, especially if the museum is looking for us. Lewis nodded, not fully listening. You can't take it back. If I do this. I know, Cassandra said. But you also know it's a one-time thing. You have to make the choice for yourself. You had to see everything to make an informed decision. It was a Faustian choice. No one would be happy, but he understood all of this was about saving one person, making someone's life a little bit better. There was no guarantee they would beat the British Museum or whoever came for them, but he could help Cassandra. His eyes focused on Akana. You're going to hate me. Akana frowned in confusion. Why would I hate you? What are you? Lewis turned to Cassandra before Akana could finish. Where is it? Reaching into her pocket, Cassandra pulled out a single tarot-sized card. She tossed it into the air, the card spinning once and growing in size as it landed in the dirt, the size of all the other paintings with a wooden trim. The image was of Cassandra, but personified differently. Like an angel, she draped her arms over a man's shoulders, a halo illuminating her crown. White wings spread outward across the canvas. Do you know your name? He asked Cassandra. She nodded. The mother, Akana, stepped forward, clearly understanding what was about to happen. Don't you dare, she said. We did not do this for you to. Akana, Cassandra said softly. There's a role for you to play in this too. Please let him do it. We don't get another shot, Akana hissed. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to you, and I don't know what you did to twist his mind to make him think this was a good idea, but we are all sacrificing things to be here. We're not doing it for. There was no debate that could change his mind and none that could change Akana's. It was just a leap of faith. So in the middle of her tirade, Lewis threw out his hand like he had when he first met the drowning and whispered Cassandra's name. Cassandra let out a gasp, stumbling backward. Lewis braced himself, expecting a scream like all the other paintings, but there wasn't one. There was a sigh of contented relief. If the other paintings feared death, feared their release, Cassandra didn't. Joy and elation poured from her as tears streamed down her face. I can feel, she said. I can feel everything. I can feel my heartbeat. I can feel the air. Her right hand rose to her face, shaking, and without hesitation she slapped herself. A whimper left her as she pressed her hand against the blooming red mark. I felt that. Akana, on the other hand, was not as joyous. What the fuck did you just do? She said. I made a choice, Lewis replied. Lewis cut off, unable to speak. There was a brief moment in which he saw it all. Her whole life, the memories that Cassandra had just shown him. Through her eyes, he saw the gaps she had left out, felt the pain as she fell down the steps, and saw the journey across the world twice over she had done. Every single memory over the past 130 years flooded into his mind, making him want to split his head open and scoop out the extra that threatened to spill. But there was nothing, no more magic. As quickly as it had come to him, as quickly as he had it, it was gone like a spark that didn't catch. Before, when he had lost his magic, he felt like he was missing something. Now he felt complete. You just screwed us, Akana said. Both of you. What the hell did I sacrifice all this for? What the hell did I even just do if you were going to throw it all away for her? And if you were going to bring us here just to suit your little mission? Cassandra raised her hand, but Akana cut her off. No, I don't fucking want to hear it, she snarled. I should turn both of you in. Return to Japan and batten down the hatches, Akana, Lewis said. I risked it all. My name, everything. For what? For you to help her, Akana, Cassandra said, her eyes following Lewis. You know you both screwed us. I want that to be perfectly clear. We had one shot, one chance to beat Evangeline and put this to rest. And you, Akana, they both said firmly. What? Lewis pointed to Cassandra's painting. In front of their eyes, the paint burned, starting from the center and working its way outward. As it did, a new image appeared. No longer a woman with her arms draped over the shoulders of a man, but truly Cassandra, bowing and reverent, a nun's attire on her body, her eyes looking upward, presumably a god. But that wasn't all that had changed. At the bottom of the painting, words written in Lewis's handwriting appeared. "The stolen," Lewis read. "What the hell just happened?" Akana asked. At first Lewis didn't speak, frowning as he attempted to reason it through. And then it all clicked. La response a state inverse. The answer is in the inverse. "Oh my God," Lewis whispered. "Oh my God. We've been going about it all wrong." Pacing around the painting, he turned to look at Cassandra and Akana. "Each painting we've been treating like a weapon, something that needs to be stopped, tamed, killed. But the paintings, like Cassandra, are victims. And when we look at them like that, see them as those who have also suffered at the hands of Edgar, they change," Akana said. "The inverse of their origins. The answer is in the inverse," Lewis repeated. "Edgar believed he could get his sister back by stealing the magic from the living, no matter the consequences. When all that's done is bring him further and further away from her. He's trying to beat death, to undo one of the most fundamental principles of existence. You can't do that, not without consequences. And each painting suffers more and more than the last as he tries more and more perverse things to get to her. What happens," Lewis continued, "if we don't treat the paintings as evil? Evangeline said the paintings react the way they do to me because they view me as a threat. They view me as Edgar Dumont. What if I use my gift to put them to rest?" "In theory," Akana said slowly, "you could end it all." Cassandra looked over at her painting. "There's no magic coming off of it," she said. "It's just paint and canvas now. Not even a fragment of magic lingering." Akana confirmed that with a nod. "So how do we do it?" "You said I'm a conduit that can find the last painting because of my bloodline," Lewis said. "We need a painting, then, something to provide the connection. Evangeline isn't going to just give you one." "We don't need her to," Cassandra whispered. "I have the one from your father's home in my apartment, Akana. We can end it there." Akana's face for the first time since Lewis knew her was painted with something that looked almost uncomfortable on her features, hope. But her sharp, attentive gaze returned as she looked past the gravestones. "Something's coming," she said. "Someone's coming," Cassandra corrected. The air rippled in front of them. Akana and Cassandra moved to protect Lewis. Magic crackled and filled the air with the scent of cinnamon. An image flickered once, twice, 3 times, and before it even took form, Lewis pushed past the 2 women. "Noah!" Lewis bridged the space between them just in time. As Noah appeared, his footing gave way, Lewis bending his knees to cushion his fall and catch him. He took a moment to look at Noah, really look at him. The sharp angles of his face, the thinness of his skin. He looked like his father in the hospital bed. Noah smiled, his eyes slightly lidded. "Hello, Mr. Dixon," he breathed out, as if speaking was hard. Swallowing through the pain, he grabbed Lewis's shoulders, forcing himself to stand on his own. "She's coming," he breathed out heavily. "For you all. We were just about to move," Cassandra replied. "Let's go," she ordered, leading the pack. Walking briskly down the hill, she began flourishing symbols with her fingers. Akana flanked Noah on his other side, helping Lewis walk him down the hill toward the cast-iron gates they had entered. The arched alcove separating the sidewalk from the graveyard rippled, revealing a well-designed French apartment. "I still don't trust you," Akana told Cassandra. "You don't have to," she said, putting her hand on Akana's back. "But think about it like this. If we die, or Evangeline gets her hands on us, you'll never get to ensure I pay for my crimes against humanity." Akana paused and nodded. "Fair." And with that, she stepped in through the alcove first. Cassandra gestured to Lewis and Noah. "Alan's why," she said. "We have a world to save." Chapter 35. Lewis didn't have time to appreciate the beauty of Cassandra's home when they entered it. The moment they stepped through the archway, the world of Maryland dissolved out of view. Cassandra made a beeline toward her study. "We don't have much time," she said firmly. "I'll start fortifying the defenses," Akana chimed in. "Evangeline is going to come with the full force of the British Museum," Noah gasped, pressing his hand against the wall as he slid down into a nearby chair with Lewis's help. "I should help you. You can barely stand up," Akana said as softly as she could. "I'll be fine. Besides, we don't need to hold her off indefinitely, just long enough for Lewis to do what he needs to do." Lewis frowned at that declaration. Akana didn't let him speak, instead answering the question he was about to ask. "This is not about making it out alive, Lewis. This is about stopping Evangeline so that you can finish this." "That wasn't part of the plan," Lewis countered. "That was always part of the plan," Cassandra said loudly enough that she could be heard from the study. Her back was turned to them, and her hands were flitting wildly as drawers opened and papers fluttered out on her command. She was searching for something specific. The only thing that matters is you stopping Edgar and putting these paintings to rest. If that means that we have to be sacrifices along the way, I'm not letting anybody else die for these paintings. Lewis was firm about that. But Noah took a deep, shaky breath and squeezed Lewis's wrist. Magic requires sacrifice, he said. Stopping it requires sacrifice. There's nothing in this world that can be accomplished of import without it. There has to be another way. Lewis muttered in disbelief. There isn't. Akana finished. And the longer we spend here debating, the less time I have to prepare. You're going to need every second you can get, Noah said through pained breath. Lewis paused and saw how Akana swallowed thickly as if even she was processing what this meant. We all have something to atone for, she muttered. Perhaps this is the way we do it, ensuring that the next generation doesn't fall down the same rabbit hole we did. We can put an end to a curse that has been around for more than 130-odd years. What better way to change the world than that? Akana glanced behind her toward the hallway that led to the front of the apartment. Someone's here, she muttered. In the building, ground floor. Many someones. I feel it too, Noah hissed, forcing himself to stand. He wobbled and almost fell over, but kept his balance. I know those signatures. I know those agents. He took a half step forward, then another, each step seeming more painful than the last. You're going to need my help. Akana chewed on her bottom lip, but didn't wait long to decide on her answer. Fine, but don't be a liability. Akana turned, disappearing down the hallway to set up incantations that would fortify the building. Noah half turned and tilted his head toward Lewis, a soft, almost sad smile on his handsome features. You're not going to make it back, are you? Lewis whispered. Noah didn't answer. Instead, he reached forward with his right hand and cupped the side of Lewis's face. His thumb stroked his cheek, and through the connection, Lewis felt small tremors rippling through his forearm and into his palm. He couldn't tell if it was fear or muscle spasms. The pain that passed over Noah's face was apparent, no matter how hard he tried to fight it and hide it. The painting Noah was bound to was stripping every bit of life force he had, and he had used his last few moments to come and help Lewis. Lewis would never be able to repay that. You can, Noah whispered, leaning forward and pressing his forehead against Lewis's and closing his eyes. Lewis imitated him. You can pay me back by ending this. Lewis, Cassandra said loudly, I need you. You too, Noah, puzzled. The two looked at each other before glancing at Cassandra's back. Now would be preferable, she said with a tinge of annoyance. Without another word, Lewis draped Noah's right arm over his shoulder and helped him walk into the study. The moment they crossed the threshold, a cool feeling passed over them as though they had passed through a sheet of water. Magic rippled outward, cascading around the walls. It shimmered for a fraction of a second like glass beads catching the light. It's a barrier, Noah said. Nothing can enter that isn't allowed. It will be the last line of defense against Evangeline, Cassandra muttered, turning to face them with the grimoire in hand. Lewis intended to ask what it was, but before he could, Noah spoke. Where did you get that? Cassandra's eyes looked up at him, and the solemn nature of her gaze said everything the two of them needed to know. Noah concluded. And that was that. I think you're the one who can help me unlock this, she said. Your sister was very good at protective charms, but what we need to help Lewis is in this book. Noah nodded, reaching out with his right hand, palm facing downward over the cover of the book. He took a deep, shaky breath, muttering a sentence under his breath in Hindi before twisting his pointer finger and middle finger over each other, spinning his palm counterclockwise and then clockwise, and slamming his hand over the cover. A puff of magic burst out of the book like an exhalation, filling the air with a sharp, strong smell of vanilla for just a fraction of a second. It was one of the first spells my sister taught me, Noah said. She found it in an old Sanskrit book and adapted it for our family. It keeps things hidden from prying eyes. Cassandra nodded, opening the book, and with a flick of her hand, the pages spun through to the end. Her eyes darted over each one, and she nodded before looking up at Noah. You should go and help Akana. Noah agreed, glancing over at Lewis and flashing him a soft smile. Remember, he whispered, I stand by what I said before. You are marvelous. Show Edgar how marvelous you are. With that, Noah hobbled away, his gait becoming stronger and stronger. With each step not because he was getting his strength back, Lewis assumed, but because the last gift Noah could give Lewis was seeing him put on a brave face. As he went to face the inevitable, Come on, Cassandra said the moment Noah was out of view. I'm going to need your help, guiding him over to the counter. Cassandra opened the grimoire containing Ishida's spells. She placed her palm against one of the pages, swiping slowly from right to left. The illegible letters morphed into English. Noah's sister was onto something, Cassandra muttered. She was only a few steps away from figuring out how you were indirectly responsible for Edgar's creation of the Macabre. I believe she probably brought this information to Evangeline. Maybe she was even able to put the pieces together about Evangeline's end goal. Are you saying Evangeline killed Noah's sister? Cassandra shook her head. No, I don't think that's it. I think Evangeline didn't know what conclusion Ishida was drawing, but the information she passed on to her did change the trajectory of her conclusions. With a flip of the page, Cassandra revealed a makeshift map of the world, not much different from the ones Lewis would see in a geography or history class. There were red dots here and there, and it took Lewis only a moment to connect them. Each one of these is where a painting was found, he whispered. Baltimore, London, Perth, Brazil, Osaka, Russia. From the corner of his eye, he saw Cassandra step away toward a chest. He paid little attention to the incantation she used to open it, but did notice that it opened slowly, without pulleys or contact. A painting rose from the depths. The chest was clearly bigger on the inside than the outside. It was the same painting that had been in Akana's family home. Ishida was close, Cassandra repeated, bringing the painting over, closer than perhaps any Nandaman had ever been. Holding the painting at chest height, Cassandra locked eyes with Lewis. What you proposed is untested. There is no science or magical data that can support your claim. But if you're right, all of this could end today. What Cassandra was really saying was that there was no way she could help him in this process. This hope, this Hail Mary of his, had to be tested alone. The walls shuddered before Lewis could speak. A distant boom from the outside pulled his focus away from Cassandra. A fight had begun in the hallway, no more than 20 or so feet away from them. Cassandra sighed and cursed in French under her breath. She gently placed the painting down and leaned it against the counter. I need to go help them, she said. 3 is better than 2. You're going to die, Lewis said. It was a matter-of-fact and blunt statement, but he didn't retract it. Without your immortality, it'll be nice to feel something again, Cassandra glibly replied. But there was a hollowness in her voice that Lewis didn't like. And besides, this is my home. There are magical secrets here that can help, that neither Akana nor Noah know about. Someone needs to be there to activate them. Cassandra walked toward the threshold and stopped. No matter what happens, Lewis, she said, seemingly unwilling to turn around and show him her face, you did your best. Your mother would be proud. Cassandra stepped over the threshold and then turned to face him. She gave him a soft smile and mouthed a word Lewis didn't hear. The barrier shimmered once more, distorting her image like he was looking at her through frosted glass. Cassandra raised her hand and pressed it against the barrier, showing him what she had done. She had revoked access to the room for herself and, most likely, everyone else but him. This room was now the true last line of defense. Cassandra turned, her blurred image now impossible for Lewis to make out clearly, and headed down the hallway to join Akana and Noah. Lewis was left alone with the painting. He forced his gaze back to it, taking a shaky breath as he grabbed its edges and lifted it to place it on the counter, leaning it against the wall. He didn't need to know its name. He wasn't trying to enter it. Not this time. What he needed was to find a way for it to see him not as a threat, but as an ally. I'm not going to hurt you, he whispered, with a level of desperation in his voice he wasn't proud of. But I need you to show me the truth. The painting didn't respond, but it didn't threaten him either. Another shudder followed, rippling through the walls this time. It was loud and heavy enough for books to drop from the shelves. Lewis frowned and turned back to the painting. I'm trying to help you. I know what Edgar did to you. I can fix it. If you just give me... Lewis jumped. A thumping sound against the barrier had pulled his attention away again. He turned and saw a body slumped against the wall. Slowly, it slid down, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. Lewis couldn't make out whose body it was, but he could see an agent standing in front of him and looking into the room. The only thing separating them was Cassandra's last spell. He couldn't make out the man's face. The man raised his hand and punched the barrier. It rippled outward, the pulse of kinetic energy manifesting in a bright white light. The light spread out and then back in again at the spot where the agent had struck the barrier. Instantly, the agent was sent flying back in a surge of power that was threefold as intense as what he had mustered to hit the barrier. Lewis gulped and concentrated on the painting again. We don't have much time. If I die, this whole thing will start over again. She will find another descendant, presuming there is one, and the pain that you're experiencing, it won't end. At least I'm trying to end it. And for Lewis, that's when everything clicked. Pain, he said slowly. Even if you're a happy painting, you were still made from pain. A moment of sorrow and anger that Edgar Dumont forced inside of you. That's the only thing you can feel. It's all you know. The creation of it, the existence of it, the channeling of it. He spoke to himself as if working through a math problem. But what if someone showed you that they're willing to share the pain with you? Lewis looked around the study. It was beautiful. Bookshelves much like the ones inside the contract house, scribbled on papers that he could only assume were magical hypotheses or theories, a coffee table off to the side, a chaise longue that rested against the window, which was also frosted from the spell Cassandra had cast. It was a peaceful place that he could imagine Cassandra lounging in, studying and conjecturing how to find the next painting or maybe even how to kill Lewis. His eyes landed on one thing, a letter opener that was glinting in the sunlight. Using his magic hand, he willed the knife upward. It floated lazily, its tip facing up. As it hovered in front of him, spinning slowly on its axis, Lewis's eyes studied it. His gaze flickered past it to the painting. Lewis swallowed thickly and glanced over his shoulder at the barrier once more. The sound that came from it was different now. It was not a heavy thump, but a crack. His eyes focused on a single spiderweb of splinters that started from the center and expanded slowly outward with each passing moment. He looked up. Lewis couldn't make out the person. Their body was only a distorted blob, but the height and the rough shape told him exactly who had replaced the man from before and was breaking Cassandra's spell. He knew he didn't have much time. Evangeline would ensure that. A simple barrier wouldn't keep her from the future she believed she was owed. Lewis squared his shoulders, dug his heels into the floor, and took a deep breath. We are connected through pain, he said to the painting. I'd have lost many people I love, and you were never given a chance to experience anything but sorrow. Let me change that. Lewis didn't hesitate. He knew if he thought about it too much, he would falter. He took a deep breath and ordered the blade to slash. The pain was sharp, much like a pinprick or a paper cut. As the blade slid across his throat, he coughed. It fell to the ground as his hand clutched his throat. Warm blood began seeping through his fingers. Lewis could feel his body threatening to fall over, but he didn't let it. Holding himself up as best he could, he let the blood coat his fingers. The throbbing and burning of the clean cut felt like every nerve of his body was on fire. His mind screamed. It was a single note blocking out everything and almost making the sound of the barrier shattering behind him inaudible. Lewis thrust his blood-stained hand forward and pressed his palm against the canvas. His words a wet gurgle. He spoke in perfect French, La Réponse State Inverse. Chapter 36. Lewis didn't tumble through the painting like he did the others. Instead, the ground under him opened up, color rushing upward in reverse as if a vacuum in the sky was sucking the canvas blank. The feeling of weightlessness lasted only a moment before the pressure of gravity yanked him down. When Lewis finally found his senses again, he was no longer standing, but lying on his back. Slowly sitting up, eyes closed, he ran fingers over his throat. There was no cut, no wound. In fact, his missing hand had returned. Using both his palms to stand up shakily, he noticed something else. Pressing his forefinger and middle finger against his throat, he could feel no pulse. It was as if he wasn't alive. He existed somewhere between the outside and inside worlds. He wondered what was happening in the former. Was his body still anchored to the painting, easy prey for whatever Evangeline wanted to do to him? Was she setting up a perimeter to catch him when he exited the painting? Or had she sawed his body away, leaving only his hand attached and making good on her promise to keep him on the edge of death to be her plaything? But he couldn't worry about that now. There were more important things, like who else was in the room with him. His eyes opened. He could see nothing but endless white at first, but slowly, like a painting being drawn on a canvas, the surroundings came into view. It was a study much like Cassandra's, or even like Evangeline's, but this one existed within a home, or an atrium. Curved glass separated the inside from the outside. Plants loomed tall and bowed their heads as they touched the ceiling, populating the room as if it was their own. There was faint classical music playing in the background. Lewis discerned that it was coming from a room or two away. A door must have been left open so that it could be heard by whoever was in this atrium. As he looked around, Lewis realized where he was. He was back in the home he had noticed in the distance when he first met Edgar Dumont. "I'm over here," a voice said in the atrium. Louis paused, debating if he should follow it. He knew who he would probably see. "There's no point in hiding," Edgar said. "We're both here now." "To that, we can both agree," Louis muttered. Louis took a deep breath and used his hands to clear a way through the plants. He pushed his way forward to where the voice was. Soon, he stepped into a clearing. Louis frowned. Edgar Dumont's back was to him, and he was standing in front of a large canvas. It was in landscape style, longer than it was tall and set up on an easel. It was so large that 4 people could have worked on it, each with their own section. But that wasn't what interested Louis. Rather, his attention was drawn to the unevenly spaced paintings arranged around the 2 of them in a semicircle. There were 9 familiar paintings, each with a chain extending from their center that was attached to shackles on Edgar Dumont. There were 2 on each ankle, 2 on each wrist, and 1 on his neck. "What do you think this needs?" Edgar asked without turning to Louis. "I think it needs more blue." Louis didn't answer, not because he couldn't think of anything, but because the canvas was blank. There was no color, no outline, no sketch. It looked as if Edgar was painting with air, or perhaps some green. He whispered, "Green is always nice." Edgar tilted his head toward Louis. He was older than when Louis had seen him in the stain, but younger than when he saw him in the balance that he had made a contract with. Early 30s, maybe, Louis thought. The same age that Louis was. As if, in some way, Edgar or the Macabre were trying to put them on equal footing. Or it was a warning that this was a crossroads in Edgar's life. One that Louis was about to face himself. "Well," Edgar said, "you're like me, a painter. You have no thoughts." Slowly and apprehensively, Louis approached until he was standing next to Edgar. He was done playing games, done being on the defensive and trying to understand the rules of whichever domain he was in. From Cassandra to Evangeline, and even to Noah's initial manipulations and Arcana's threats, he'd always been on the defensive. He wouldn't do the same with Edgar. Not this time. "Where are we?" he asked. It took Edgar a moment to answer. "I suppose this is the afterlife. I remember dying in some disgusting home in the New World. It was a place that I called my own once I left France. Took a boat over to America. Tried to make a life for myself for a few years, but consumption got the best of me and I died alone. I woke up here." He raised his hands, the shackles clinking. The paintings attached to the chains bound around his wrists shuddered and groaned, not in pain, but in annoyance. It was as though they were threatening him to stop moving. "And I've been here ever since, finishing this painting." Edgar glanced back at Louis. "How long?" "Long enough for you to have lived a full life, and yet I accomplished nothing." Edgar sighed. "I wouldn't say that," Louis muttered, turning to face him. "You hurt a lot of people, killed a lot of people, but I couldn't save her." Louis didn't need to ask who Edgar was talking about. As if on cue, he heard from behind them a child's laughter. It was bright and warm and squealed with joy. A soft, feminine voice spoke next. "Edgar," the voice gently scolded. "Come on, you have to get dressed. I need you to meet my husband-to-be. You're going to love him." It was Edgar's sister, Amelia. Pain and sadness flooded Louis, and, for a moment, he almost felt sorry for Edgar. "You know what the cruelest punishment is?" Edgar asked. "These chains." I hear her, hear my family. Memories of my life playing themselves over and over, just out of view, just out of full earshot, in the room over there, and I can't get to them because of these blasted chains. You did this too. Yourself, Edgar, Louis said carefully. "Did I?" Edgar asked. "Did I deserve this punishment? The world took from me over and over again my sister, my wife, my lovers. What did I do to deserve that?" "Louis, the world deals everyone a shitty hand. You don't get to go out and hurt people who have nothing to do with your sorrow. You don't get to extinguish others' lives in hopes of having a second chance at your own." "And why not?" Edgar snapped. "Why don't I get a happy ending?" Louis didn't flinch. He felt like he should have. But what could Edgar do to hurt him now? "These paintings," Louis said quietly, "what these paintings that have you trapped here with their chains have done is no different than what you did to them. Each time you made one to process your grief or your anger, you created a moment of darkness. The painting had no hope of experiencing anything else but that same horrific emotion you felt. You somehow found out how to take the sorrow and anger you were feeling, compartmentalize it, and pull it out of your body and put it into these paintings, giving yourself a moment of reprieve, but damning them to feeling that sorrow for the rest of their existence." Edgar didn't challenge Louis's words, so Louis continued speaking. "Just like you yearn for belonging and comfort, So did they. They latched onto people throughout the centuries who sang the same song of sorrow they did, and they hurt people like you hurt people. And so, when you died, they reached out and put you here, that last bit of your soul that still existed, connecting all of these paintings because they were a part of you, prevented you from experiencing the one thing you ever wanted, peace, because you did not give it to them. This is your afterlife, yes, Edgar, but it's not one that's brought about by the gods. It's brought about by you. A new voice filled Lewis's ears from the distance. It was deeper, heartier, a man's voice. There was an undertone of chaos. Lewis could hear a group of people laughing and the clinking of glasses. It was the sound of a party. Do you know how much I love you? Edgar said. An older version of himself was speaking to the man whose voice Lewis had heard. More than Galileo loves his theories, the voice wasn't familiar to Lewis, but it reminded him of the grief-stricken man he saw in the hospital in the stain. Lewis could only assume that the person Edgar was talking to was the father of his lover, who had been killed in the explosion. Lewis turned back to Edgar. This painting you're working on, you didn't finish it in your real life, did you? Edgar didn't answer, but Lewis didn't need him to. That's where the rumor came from. An unfinished painting. In the real world, people believe this painting can give them power over time and reality itself. And maybe they're right. I can feel it in the air. I can taste it on my tongue and my teeth. Pure magic exists here, locked in this pocket reality that's your prison, and that was brought about by these paintings that you damned to hell. You're lost to, Lewis, Edgar said. You were looking at me, and I found a way to look back at you. They were only glimpses, fractions of moments through your eyes, feelings that snuck through time and found their way to me. You understand what it means to lose and to suffer, and as my descendant, this painting and its magic could be yours. You could change history. You and I could bring back the ones we lost. They're gone, Edgar, all of them. We don't mess with the afterlife. We don't change the course of time like that. Because you're afraid, Edgar concluded. No, because other people are affected by the choices we make. Individuals who have nothing to do with our sorrow and don't deserve to suffer. Bringing back your sister or my mother could mean that other people aren't born. That wars that never happened do happen. We have no idea. But damning them to a sentence for a crime they didn't commit, to bring back someone they don't know, is no different than what you did in London. So why are you here, then? Edgar asked. To bring peace, Lewis said without hesitation. To you, to these paintings, to me. It's what I promised. Lewis turned his gaze away from Edgar. He scanned the room, his eyes lingering over each individual painting, much like with the drawings from the Jack the Ripper room. If he tilted his head just slightly to the left or right, each piece looked different. On the one hand, there was the drowning, a morose image of a woman in a blood-stained lake. But there was also the stolen, a woman at peace who had finally escaped a life of oppression. Each one followed the same pattern, a version of sadness and darkness and a version of peace and light, the before and the after, the pain and the healing. Lewis had made a promise to the paintings to help them heal, and he intended to keep it. As he closed his eyes and placed the palm of his left hand on the canvas Edgar hadn't finished, Lewis felt 9 different sensations, each slightly different but familiar at the same time. All Lewis could picture was Noah. Lewis could see his smiling face. He hoped that, whatever happened in Cassandra's apartment, he wasn't too late to bring Noah, Cassandra, and Akana the one thing the Dumont family always wanted, peace. Chapter 37. Lewis, you're staring again. Lewis snapped out of his reverie. His blurred vision came back into focus. Sure enough, he had been staring. His eyes had been focused on a painting hanging above the fireplace of the coffee shop where he and his mother sat. It was a beautiful piece. He didn't know the artist, but he liked how the strokes evoked a mixture of peace and sorrow all at once. Lewis made a mental note as he pulled out his phone to take a picture so he could find the artist if they were still alive. Perhaps he could talk to them, mentor under them. And if they were dead, perhaps he could buy a print himself. Sorry, he said, turning back to his mother. She was sitting across from him. She narrowed her eyes playfully and crossed her arms over her chest. She glanced behind her at the piece and then back at Lewis. Always distracted, she teased. Lewis grinned softly. It had been 6 months since he had put the paintings to rest, since he last saw Edgar Dumont. As he had closed his eyes and thought about Noah, Akana, and the rest of them, the world faded away, and he awoke in his family home in Baltimore. He could smell cinnamon rolls and hear the soft, sultry voice of Ella Fitzgerald downstairs. It was a normal Sunday morning. His mother had called him down. Sounding both annoyed and playful, she chastised him for sleeping in like he was a teenager all over again. Springing up and noticing that he still had both of his hands, Louis ran to his computer. He Googled Noah, Arcana, and the British Museum. There was no information on any macabre paintings, magic, or anything of the sort. Louis surmised that when he gave the paintings peace, they gave him a gift in return, rewriting time so that the magic link to his family never existed. And if there was no magic, there was no reason for Evangeline or Cassandra or anyone to come for his mother. He had the life he wanted, and the first thing he did was convince his mother that they needed to see the world. For the past 6 months, they had been traveling. London, Osaka, Perth, Brazil, Russia. Their second-to-last stop was Chicago. They were in a coffee shop not far from the Bean, which his mother badly wanted to visit. That was their afternoon plan. "You can't chastise me for having a vision," he said, "for seeing the world in a different way." "Oh, no, I love it," his mother said. "It means you take after me instead of your father, which, between you and me, is every mother's dream." Louis rolled his eyes and barked out a laugh. He checked his phone and showed it to his mother. "We should get going soon," he said. "We want to see that show, and the last thing I want to do is be late. Can't reinforce the stereotype that black people show up to things late," his mother confirmed. Louis nodded. "Exactly." His mother smiled before also pulling out her phone and showing it to him. "Your dad's calling, probably to ask if we're coming home at the end of the week. We've been gone for 6 months. I'm sure he misses his wife. I'm sure he misses me and you." Louis nodded. "I'll pay the bill. You go and talk to him." His mother smiled, letting her gaze linger on him before standing up and walking out of the coffee shop. With her phone at her ear, Louis watched her retreating figure before flagging down the waitress. With the universal symbol for the check, he turned back to the seat his mother had just vacated. It was no longer vacant. Instead, Noah was sitting across from him, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His hair was a little longer than Louis remembered. Noah had pulled it back into a slick ponytail. "What are you doing here?" Louis said shakily. Noah didn't speak at first, just looked Louis up and down. "Do you know who I am?" Louis asked slowly. If the painting had rewritten the past and given him his mother, it was reasonable to assume that, with no magic involved, there was no reason for Noah to reach out to him. Also, Louis had never thought about it, but if there were no macabre paintings for Evangeline to hunt, Ishida wouldn't have died. And if she hadn't died, would Noah have followed in her footsteps and gone to work at the British Museum, or would he be in India? With no information to confirm or deny any of his theories, Louis had made the conscious choice after that first Google search to let sleeping dogs lie. And yet here was Noah, sitting across from him and looking directly into his eyes. "I've been searching for you," Noah said. Louis's hackles were raised, and he clenched his fists by his sides. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Yes, you do, Louis," Noah said softly. "You know this isn't real." Louis blinked. It was a normal reaction to an inexplicable statement, but as he did, the world flickered like it had inside Akana's home. The coffee shop, which had been bustling with people, which had soft music playing in warm light from the fireplace embracing everyone inside, which had such a welcoming atmosphere that provided the perfect respite from the cold Chicago winter, disappeared. It was hollow, empty, derelict, abandoned. Only Noah and Louis remained sitting at the table. Louis blinked once more, and the coffee shop flickered back into existence. "I don't know what you're talking about," Louis repeated. Sighing, Noah reached his hand forward, palm upward. Louis leaned back. "You know that nothing has ever been this easy for you. Why would it start now?" Louis didn't say anything. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see the waitress approaching with the receipt. The quicker he could get out of here, the faster he could return to his mother. And the faster he returned to his mother, the sooner he could put Noah and whatever this was behind him. He had won. He had done what they had asked. He had beaten Evangeline, and he had put the paintings to rest. There was nothing more Noah could or should ask of him. There was. Louis paused and looked up at the waitress. She had been a freckled girl with reddish-brown hair and a tattoo of a snake coming out of her shirt and rising up her clavicle. But now she had a familiar Japanese face and was dressed in the same outfit the freckled girl had been wearing. "It wasn't easy to find you," Akana said. But Noah's right. None of this is real. The bell over the coffee shop door chimed cheerfully, and Louis quickly glanced over, hoping it was his mother. Though his mother did open the door, the woman who flashed her a smile and slipped inside with the last of their little quartet. Cassandra brushed snow off her shoulders and made a beeline for their table. She took the third unoccupied seat and sat down on Louis's left. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. We couldn't leave you here. It's a beautiful tapestry. You're an artist once again, that's for sure. But it's a forgery, Louis," Noah said. "It's too perfect. You know this." And now, of course, Louis knew it. Everything had just been too easy. An upgrade to first class as they headed to London, an encounter with one of his favorite actors while leaving the West End, an offer from an artist in Berlin to come back sometime and talk shop with him, a handsome man that, according to his mother, was very clearly flirting with him. Every city, things had happened just a little bit too perfectly, and yet, "I deserve this," Louis said. His voice was a whisper. "You do," Akana allowed. "But when have we ever gotten what we deserve without fighting for it? When has magic ever worked without a sacrifice?" Noah asked. Sighing, Cassandra pulled off her leather gloves and placed her hand gently over his. "Let me show you." Without asking for permission, Cassandra pushed her memories into Louis's mind. The coffee shop spun counterclockwise as if their group was the center of its axis. Images flashed through his mind similar to when Cassandra had shown him her memories of France. From an outsider's point of view, Louis saw Evangeline shatter the barrier Cassandra had erected for him. He saw the magic pulse outward when he touched the lingering and healed it. It was a blast of magic so pure, so raw that it should have killed Evangeline, Akana, Noah, and Cassandra. But it simply warped around those who had pledged to help him, whereas it made Evangeline scream. "When you touched the painting," Cassandra's voice said in his mind, "you unleashed all their magic. It was like 1,000 nuclear bombs of arcane energy. But your mind also protected us." We couldn't say the same for Evangeline. As the effect of the magic subsided, the painting they had taken from Akana's home, the lingering also known as the kindness, no longer was the portrait in front of them. Now Louis was at the center of it, and flanking him were the people. Edgar Dumont was on his left and his mother was on his right. There were others fanning outward behind Edgar and his mother in an angled pattern. They had faces he didn't recognize, but he assumed they were other relatives and descendants of the Dumont line. Back at the coffee shop, Cassandra pulled her hand away from Louis's. He could see his mother again, still leaning against the glass outside and talking to his father on the phone. Louis felt hot tears streaming down his face. Without needing to be asked, Noah reached over and placed his hands in Louis's palms. "It's okay," he said. "It will be okay, but you can't stay here any longer." "Where's here?" Louis asked. "You know," Akana finished for him. "You know." Louis looked past Noah at his mother. "She's so happy," he said quietly. "She's not real, my love," Cassandra whispered. "Don't fall into the same trap your ancestor did. Magic cannot fix what hurts us. It cannot change what broke us. I know that better than anyone, because when you try to play God, others suffer the consequences. The law of equivalent exchange, Louis, Akana reminded him. If you try to change what shouldn't be changed, other forces that should be immutable have to give. The world is worse off when people try to break the rules that hold our existence together. Louis knew this all to be true. Deep down, he knew they had only come to save him, somehow or another, but it would be up to him to decide if he wanted to leave. After all, he had told Edgar the same thing. They had no right to play God. They couldn't play God. "Is everything to your liking?" a woman said, appearing suddenly at their side. Louis blinked and looked up. Cassandra, Noah, and Akana had disappeared. Everyone in the coffee shop, including his mother outside, had disappeared. Only he and the woman remained. There was no music, no warm, dripping cinnamon buns, no crackling fire, no art, just a single table, and the woman who Louis had only ever seen from a distance. She took the seat opposite his, but even up close, her more distinguishable features were distorted, like a painting that had been smudged with the swipe of a hand. Deep down, Louis knew exactly who she was. He knew her soft features and warm smile. "I was being honest," she said softly. "If there's something not to your liking, we can change it." At first, Louis didn't speak. He was processing her words. "What do you mean by that?" Amelia Dumont shifted her weight. Louis wasn't sure if it was the real, her or something the paintings had created to communicate with him. He didn't think it mattered. "We can change things. Make you president. Make that cute boy of yours your boyfriend or your husband. This is your world, Louis. It's not real. Does it have to be?" she asked. "Can't it just be a kindness that was given to you?" Something to make everything that you went through, your sacrifice, worth it. You chose us over power, over life, over everything. We want to help you. It has been a good 6 months, Lewis concluded, given his whole life. Beforehand, he had to admit he had started to believe that such happiness was possible, that his happily ever after was within his grasp, that it was something he had earned. But no, it wasn't earned. These memories, these joys, these highs, these successes were gifted to him. They lacked substance. I want to go, Amelia. I have to go. Amelia studied Lewis. The soft smile on her face never left it. He noticed that her eyes didn't blink. They were frozen in time, exactly like a painting. You will never see her again, she said. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. You will go back to that cruel world and have to face whatever challenges come your way with no guarantee that you will succeed. Those are my choices to make. Failures or successes, they are what make a life. That's what your brother never understood. Life may deal me a bad hand, sometimes many bad hands, but it's still my life, and I will be the one who decides my fate. Amelia nodded and let out a soft sigh. Lewis couldn't tell if it was a sign of resignation, acceptance, or annoyance. My brother would have done well if he had someone like you in his life, she said, and I hope you're happy with what comes next. Amelia leaned forward and whispered, You have brought us peace, Lewis, and I hope this choice brings you some too. She rested her elbows on the table and brought her right hand up to the center of Lewis's face. Take a deep breath, Lewis. This is going to hurt. Before he could say anything, Amelia snapped her fingers. She was right. Pain erupted in the pit of his stomach and inside his lungs. He felt a burning sensation, like hot lava had been forced down his throat. He fell to his knees on the wooden floor, which shattered under him. Darkness, whiteness, and all the colors in between flashed in front of him. He choked and clawed at air. He was unable to see, to determine what was up, down, left, or right. He was falling. He was rising. He was being pulled apart. But there was something else. He felt a gripping sensation, an anchor grabbing onto him. Lewis reached for it, using both his hands. He blindly grabbed it and held on for dear life. He tugged and felt as if his entire being was pulling apart. He wanted to scream, wanted to give up, to tell Amelia to pull him back. Every bit of pain, every physical agony, every emotional suffering he had felt in his whole life, he was experiencing them in every cell of his body at once. He held on to that familiar feeling, knowing that it would save him because he had promised he would always be there. As the shifting colors solidified into something real and tangible, Lewis let out a gasp. He panted heavily and turned over onto his chest. A violent cough escaped him. I've got you, Noah said, holding him close. You need to fix him, Akana's voice said. Lewis continued to cough, but he couldn't breathe. The sharp burning feeling returned to his throat. The gash he had given himself in Cassandra's home had returned. Noah manhandled him, flipping him onto his back and using his right hand to cradle Lewis's neck as his left hand moved upward and slid against the cut. Hold on, Noah said. Warmth pulled outward from his fingers as the gash healed. Lewis's whole body burned with pain, but slowly, surely, he could feel the wound closing. His vision cleared, Noah looking down at him, Akana and Cassandra standing over Noah's shoulder. The painting behind them, with Lewis in the center, and his ancestors and descendants seeming to look down on him in judgment. 2 words were written at the bottom of the painting. 4 letters were in his handwriting, 3 were in his mother's, and 3 were in Edgar's. The words gave up the title of the last painting of the set, the Macabre. Epilogue 5 months later, this is the place. Cassandra studied the little red book she'd been carrying around with her for as long as she and Lewis had been traveling. He hadn't gotten even a glance inside the book. Cassandra and the book were never separated. The few glimpses he'd had showed Bible verses, a few illustrations she'd done over the years, and notes that had always seemed to help them over the past few months. After dispelling the Macabre in Paris, Lewis had spent about 2 weeks recovering before jumping back into the action. There were logistics for them to work through. International questions about why a Parisian apartment complex's top floor had been completely blown off and how no other floor was affected by the blast. Of course, the magical organizations who were in the know across the world understood, and they'd done their best to keep the explosion under wraps. America, England, France, even Japan in some way, shape, or form had a hand in what had happened. Noah had agreed to keep what happened under wraps, but with his new title, he couldn't act in the same way he had before. The crown will not pursue you. he said as acting director of curation for the British Museum. And with your offer from France and the Direction Générale des Arts Occultes, we won't interfere with your choices either. That had been the last time they talked. Lewis wondered how Noah was doing, whether he was settling into his new responsibilities as director, or if he felt the echoes of Evangeline's presence in the same office she claimed as her own just months ago. What if Cassandra was right, and they did their job well here? He'd see him soon enough. Would you like to do the honors? Cassandra asked. Lewis nodded, approaching the door of the home. It was nondescript, much like his own in Baltimore, a simple two-story house that had a hum of love and community pulsing out of it. He wondered how the resident inside would handle what he was about to say, whether they knew their life was about to change. And so, he took a deep breath and rapped his knuckles against the wooden door. Just a minute, a clear voice spoke. There came shuffling noises of something falling, the laughter of a baby, and the sound of ATV upstairs, muffled but clear. Lewis smiled as he stepped back, the door opening a moment later. A woman with tight brown coils that were a shade lighter in some spots than others, either victims of a poor dye job or bleaching from the sun, opened the door. She was only a few years older than Lewis, something he wouldn't have been able to tell from her features, but the file Cassandra had on their target gave them as much information as they needed to complete their task. Nalini, he asked. The woman frowned, her brown eyes twisting in confusion. Yes, she said slowly, stepping out, halfway closing the door. Can I help you? Lewis looked over his shoulder at Cassandra. They'd grown close over the past 5 months, ever since France and the gal had made its apology offer, even providing him citizenship in exchange for helping them understand magic that focused on reality altering. They'd spent more time together than not. Cassandra's magic and knowledge had been essential to tracking down the other Macabre paintings and, ultimately, finding this woman. You have no idea who I am, he said, but I'm going to ask that you trust me. Nalini closed the door behind her, a mix of confusion and a tinge of anger on her face. Look, she said, I don't know if you're selling me something or trying to get me to join a church, but Lewis shook his head, interrupting her. I promise you, neither of those things. But from what I know about you, you're a woman who's spent her whole life in Argentina. You had to stay here in Rosario, though you wanted to go and get an engineering degree at the National University of San Luis. You fell in love with a boy because he was there, and he gave you the beautiful children. You have a good life. I'm not questioning that, but I'm offering you the chance for something great, something extraordinary. You wanted to become an engineer to make the impossible possible. And if you give me your hand, I think we can make that happen. Lewis extended his good hand palm up. Quietly, Cassandra bridged the space between them, resting her own hand on Lewis's shoulder. Nalini studied the palm and looked back up at him. Is this some sort of sex thing? She asked slowly. Cassandra chuckled. Trust me, child, even if it was, this boy here is not my type, and you and I are certainly not his, she said. But maybe you'll meet the one who is his type if you're curious. Trust me, I'd be curious enough to take a leap of faith if I were you. Lewis glared at her, but Cassandra just shrugged. We were going to need his help anyway. He's busy, Lewis argued. Not too busy to help his lover, she teased. Both their gazes turned back to Nalini. A voice from inside, an older woman's, raspy and speaking Spanish, called her name. We'll have you right back, he promised. My children, you won't be gone more than a few minutes. Nalini chewed on her bottom lip, and Lewis could tell she was juggling the two thoughts in her head, staying or going. The possibility of something great or the comfort of something convenient. I have to be back in time for dinner, she said. Lewis nodded. Promise. Slowly, Nalini put her right hand into the palm of Lewis's left. The pads of her fingertips were rough, but her overall touch was soft and warm. Lewis smiled, but didn't have enough time to warn her before the world around them folded in, as if the space where they stood was a drain, and all the color and mass around them was being pulled down. A moment later, that feeling of gravity pulling them down polarized and reversed. But instead of being in Argentina, they stood inside a Parisian apartment overlooking the Seine. Nalini stumbled backward, tripping and almost falling onto her rear end, but Lewis extended his right arm, catching her with his magic, gently stepping backward and pulling her upright like a rope was wrapped around her. She settled back on her feet. Cassandra grinned proudly. You've gotten better at that. Lewis didn't say anything, but smiled, turning his attention to Nalini. I know that was terrifying. Nalini took a step back, pulling out a silver cross that dangled from a chain that caught light from the window. She whispered a prayer, her backside bumping into the nearby wall, lined with about 100 books of magic he and Cassandra had gathered, not only from her collection, or lent from the French government, but also from their travels around the world. Louis hadn't even scratched the surface of the information hidden inside them, but he would. If you want to go home, darling, we can make that happen. And you won't even remember what you just saw, Cassandra promised, raising her right hand and wiggling her fingers at her. It will only take a second. You won't feel a thing, Cassandra, a voice to the right warned, a familiar, masculine, smooth voice. Louis turned his gaze as a form rippled into appearance. Noah, dressed in a crisp, black suit, his hair slightly longer than it was before, now shoulder length. He smiled at Louis before turning his gaze back to her. Don't make me call Akana. You know she has feelings about you hiding out in France. She's still mad you decided to side with the Gao instead of the Neikaku Juchesashitsu. You don't need to call me. Akana's voice rang out through the room as her own form appeared. She touched down as if she'd stepped from the second ledge of a landing and spiraled herself into thin air to land on the ground floor of the apartment. Akana was wearing overalls, a bandana wrapped around her short hair, and smudges of dirt on her arms. Louis arched his brow, his gaze focused on the marks. Akana's eyes followed his own. Seeing what he saw, she cursed in Japanese, licking her thumb and rubbing the dirt away. I'm trying this whole new thing, she said, bored, as if she'd given the explanation 100 times. Cleaning my father's house without magic is supposed to be therapeutic, but honestly, it's just a pain. I don't understand how humans do it. You're human, Louis said. Barely, she muttered. Then, louder, by the way, the offer still stands if you get tired of Parisians. Who are you people? Nalini gasped, pressing herself more firmly against the wall, as if she might blend in with it. I don't have any money. I don't have whatever you want. Noah turned his gaze to Louis. It was soft, warm, longing, and all Louis wanted to do was walk over and talk to him, but they all knew why they were here. Would you like to do the honors? Noah asked. This was your idea, after all, and I don't have forever, Akana added. I'm waiting for a delivery. Louis rolled his eyes. Nice to see you both too, he said, before turning his gaze back to Nalini. He walked over to her and noted how she stood on her tippy toes as if trying to get farther away from him. I promise you, nothing I said is a lie, he said softly, and I'm not going to hurt you. No one here is going to hurt you. You don't know this, but you have an ancestor, a man who was much like us, much like you, about 250 years ago. This man was a magician, and I know, before you call us crazy or the devil or anything, it sounds far-fetched. It sounds insane, really, but it's true, and I only need you to do one thing for us. If it doesn't work, or if it's too much for you to handle, or if you just completely don't want to ever see us again, you won't have to. But I think you might be curious, just like I was, about the world around you that you can't see with your naked eye. Louis extended his hand to her, beckoning her once more to take it. If I do what you say, you'll send me back, she asked. Louis nodded. And if you want, Cassandra will wipe your memories of all this, as promised. That's exactly what I want, Nalini grumbled, taking his hand and pulling herself away from the wall. Louis smiled as he led her into the main room of the apartment. France had been nice to him, offering him a beautiful place to live and as many resources as France could offer. It was a surprising gift from his ancestral home, considering his descent from Edgar. Citizenship would have been more than enough. Ignoring what had happened and giving him a pass back to America was all he'd hoped for. But here he was, working for France, helping them understand magic. He had found his purpose, and maybe he could do the same for Nalini. Noah had contributed to. As its new director, the resources of the British Museum were at his disposal. That included allowing Louis access to the contract house as he saw fit. It had been a great help, especially when he wanted to travel without France knowing. And Louis could only assume it helped Noah keep tabs on him in case he needed to intervene. It was nice being able to see his friend Abernathy every once in a while too, though he knew even that was about to change. As he and Nalini walked into the living room, there was one door between the windows that, if anyone thought about it too closely, they'd realize didn't lead to anything. In fact, the windows overlooked the street. There was no second room attached to it, but the door was there. It was a door that didn't attract attention unless it was needed, and now it was. Put your hand on the door for me, Louis asked. Nalini frowned. That's it. Louis nodded. Just put your hand on it. If nothing happens, then we're good. Nalini didn't speak at first. She stepped out of the ring carefully, as if the blackness would make it hard for her to find her footing. Once she was sure, she stepped slowly forward, looking at Louis and then back at George. "Thank you," George said to Louis, and then turned his gaze to Nalini. "Thank you." Nalini didn't speak, her eyes wide with wonder. Her gaze moved over to Louis. "I did this?" He nodded. "I can help people. We all here, some of us more than others, have tried to help people. I think you can do incredible things, Nalini, with that gift of yours, if you want." "Yes," Nalini said, after he barely finished. "Absolutely yes." Cassandra, Akana, and Noah walked over, Akana checking her phone as it vibrated in her pocket. "Great. I missed my delivery." Cassandra rolled her eyes. "Are you ever happy?" "No," Akana said directly. "At most, I'm mildly amused." Louis chuckled a bit, looking over at Noah as he stood by his side. "It worked, which means every house connected to Abernathy has just become a normal home," Noah said. He sighed. "The British are no longer going to be able to use him to transfer and move between countries or continents. This is going to be a problem. We had a feeling it would. No, you had a feeling it would work. And seeing it now, I'm glad it did," he said warmly. "Is it a problem you're going to have to deal with?" Louis asked. Noah shook his head. "As I said, I was only a temp. I turned in my resignation before I came here. Successful or not, I'm not leaving your side again." Louis smiled, a heady glow spreading through him. And as Nalini and George talked, Noah nodded his head toward Akana and Cassandra, slipping his hand into Louis's and walking with him to the other side of the room. "Before I left, I did get some intel, though. The Crown has been following a source that might interest us," Noah said, keeping his voice low. "Evangeline's presence has been detected in 3 different locations: Cairo, Mexico City, and Singapore. Only blips, but it's her. She was burned alive," Noah, Akana reminded him. "We all saw it, and I did it," Louis added. "If you think Evangeline Thompson was killed that easily, then you underestimate my previous boss. I don't put it above her to have transported her mind outside of her body last minute. She was an agent like me. She was an even greater magician. She still has contacts, people at the museum, and beyond who support her. Informants. She can't be left to her own devices," Cassandra firmly stated. They all stared at her. "I know that's rich coming from me, but she has no country to call home now. She's a fugitive. She's a mercenary. And she has nothing to lose," Akana finished. "That makes her dangerous." Louis considered it. He had a life now. He had a purpose. Helping France wasn't just a fun pastime. The DGAO had taken a chance on him. Would he be considered a criminal if he abandoned them? But wouldn't going after Evangeline be helping them? Noah's eyes cut to Louis. "What do you want to do?" Louis looked over at George and Nalini. Her shoulders had relaxed a bit, as she'd found refuge with her ancestor in a pair of chairs. From the way her hands moved, she was describing something to him, and he watched with wonder. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "she can be redeemed. We gave you a chance, Cassandra." Cassandra shrugged. "I've been helping you as my penance and donating the money I've made over the years to the descendants of those I've killed, Louis. You're not nearly done yet," Akana reminded her. "Be that as it may, Cassandra's right. She wanted to atone. Can you say the same for Evangeline? We won't know until we try. Is it worth trying?" Akana insisted. "It's always worth it," Louis said. "So, it's settled," Noah said firmly. "We go after her, on our own. No countries to back us up, and then we're done," Akana said, even if the way she said it didn't sound confident. "And then we're done," Noah finished. "Who knows, maybe I'll work for my parents' telecom business after this." "Sounds boring," Louis grinned teasingly. "That's because you don't know what's coming after 5G. Seriously, though, it might give me time to figure out what I want to do in life without knowing." Noah fell silent. He didn't need to finish for Louis to know what he meant. "Who in the world am I?" Louis quoted. That's the great puzzle." Noah arched his brow at him as Louis shook his head, squeezing his hand. "Never mind. Come on. We have a soul to save." He walked over to Nalini and George. "For now, we're going to take you home," he said gently. "George, do you want to go with her?" "I'd love that." "Great," Louis said. "And when we get back, Nalini, we will show you this new world that you're now a part of. You cannot just show me this." She gestured wildly and then abandoned me. "I'm not doing that, I promise. We'll come back for you. But right now, there's something the 4 of us have to finish. You'll find, though, that George here is a fount of magical knowledge and history. Let him be a part of a home for a bit. rather than be a home. Learn from him and share your family in return. That's magic too, okay? She breathed. But then we find you, and the next part of your journey starts. Nalini nodded, and she and George stood up and walked over to where Cassandra had created a portal through which Louis could see the door to Nalini's house. See you soon, he promised. They walked through and disappeared. Noah came over to stand right behind him. You're a good man, Louis Dixon, he whispered into Louis's ear. So are you, Louis said, and he could feel Noah stiffen. He turned around and looked into Noah's eyes. You are. It's why I want you to take me on that date. It's why I want, when this is all over, for you to find yourself here in my apartment with me, together, Noah said quietly, hopefully, a question more than a confirmation. Together. And then Louis did something he'd wanted to do for a long time. He kissed the beautiful young man standing before him. Gross, Akana said. It's love, Akana. Cassandra chastised her even as Louis and Noah disengaged. Louis's heart was beating fast, and Noah's eyes gleamed, and it was all Louis could do to not kiss him again. He lingered on that word Cassandra had just said, love. Now, that was magic he wanted to explore, which he would. With Noah, he was as certain of that as anything. I'm aware, Akana replied. I'm also aware we have a madwoman on the loose. She was right, yet she also wasn't, because Louis wasn't sure madwoman was right. Evangeline was a woman, yes, and she was probably angry, but not crazy. No, scared, alone, confused. He could believe that. He could also believe that somewhere in Evangeline, there was a person who needed their help, and despite Akana's, Cassandra's, or Noah's opinions of Evangeline, if he could save her, Louis would. It would have been what his mother wanted, but more importantly, it was what he wanted, and that was all that mattered.